Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation of Betrayal. Colonel Derek Thorne had built his life on three pillars: duty, honor, and family. At 38, he commanded respect from every soldier under his command and had earned his rank through blood, sweat, and unwavering dedication to his country. His marriage to Linda had been the anchor that kept him grounded through 15 years of military service, deployments, and the chaos that came with being a special operations commander. Linda Thorne, née Rodriguez, had been the perfect military wife, or so Derek believed. She'd married him at 22, a bright-eyed college graduate who claimed to understand the sacrifices that came with loving a soldier. Their twin children, Michael and Emma, now 14, had been the light of Derek's life. Every deployment, every mission, every moment of danger had been endured with their faces in his mind. What Derek didn't know was that Linda had been living a double life for the past 3 years. Dr. Gregory Hoffman was everything Derek wasn't: smooth, wealthy, and permanently stationed in one place. As the head of pediatric surgery at Cedar Hills Medical Center, he commanded a different kind of respect, one that came with expensive suits and country club memberships. At 42, he was divorced, sophisticated, and had developed a particular taste for married women who felt neglected by their absent husbands. Linda had met Gregory during Emma's appendectomy 2 years ago. What started as grateful conversations in hospital corridors had evolved into clandestine meetings, expensive gifts hidden in secret accounts, and elaborate lies about book clubs and charity events. Gregory had promised her a life of luxury, stability, and presence, everything she claimed Derek couldn't provide. The affair had grown bolder over time. Gregory had purchased a penthouse apartment across town specifically for their meetings. He'd whispered promises of marriage once Linda was free, painting pictures of European vacations and a life without the constant fear of losing her husband to war. Linda had begun to see Derek not as a hero, but as an obstacle to her happiness. What neither Linda nor Gregory knew was that Derek's latest deployment wasn't just another mission. 3 months ago, he'd been handpicked by the Pentagon for Operation Darkwater, a classified mission so sensitive that even his commanding officer couldn't know the details. The mission required complete communication blackout. No calls, no emails, no contact with the outside world for exactly 1 year. Derek had been given 24 hours to arrange his affairs before disappearing. He tried to explain to Linda that this deployment was different, that he couldn't stay in contact, but she'd exploded in fury. "You're choosing the military over your family again," she'd screamed. "We need you here, Derek. The kids need their father." He'd held her that night, promising he'd return and make it up to them. He'd kissed his children goodbye, whispered that he loved them more than life itself, and disappeared into the shadows of classified operations. Within 2 weeks of Derek's departure, Linda had moved Gregory into the house. She'd told the neighbors that Derek had abandoned them, that he'd finally chosen his career over his family permanently. Michael and Emma, confused and hurt by their father's sudden absence and lack of communication, had begun to believe their mother's version of events. Gregory had played the role of the devoted stepfather perfectly. He'd attended Michael's baseball games, helped Emma with her science projects, and showered Linda with the attention she'd craved. The children, desperate for a father figure, had gradually warmed to him. Linda had convinced herself that this was the family she'd always deserved. As months passed, Linda's story became more elaborate. She told friends that Derek had been having an affair with a fellow soldier, that he'd emptied their joint account and disappeared. She'd hired a ruthless divorce attorney, Rebecca Stone, who specialized in military divorces and had a reputation for destroying soldiers' careers and finances. The plan was simple: file for divorce based on abandonment, claim sole custody of the children, and keep the house Derek had bought with his combat pay and savings. Gregory had even offered to pay for the legal fees, seeing it as an investment in their future together. But Derek Thorne wasn't just any soldier. He was a man who'd survived 3 tours in Afghanistan, who'd planned and executed operations that had changed the course of conflicts. He was a man who'd learned that in war, the greatest victories came not from strength, but from patience, intelligence, and the ability to strike when your enemy least expected it. Unknown to Linda and Gregory, Derek had been planning for this possibility long before his deployment. His years in special operations had taught him that betrayal could come from anywhere, even from those closest to you. He'd installed security systems in his house that Linda didn't know about, had financial safeguards in place, and had cultivated relationships with people who owed him favors. More importantly, Derek had inherited his grandfather's property, 200 acres of remote Montana wilderness that his family had never known about. It was there, in a cabin that officially didn't exist, that Derek had spent his leave time over the past 5 years, preparing for scenarios that most people couldn't imagine. As Derek completed his mission overseas, eliminating terrorist cells and disrupting international threats, Linda and Gregory were making their final preparations. The divorce papers had been filed. The custody hearing was scheduled. Linda had already picked out her wedding dress for the ceremony she planned to have 6 months after her divorce was finalized. They believed they held all the cards. They believed Derek was just another absent soldier who'd lost his family to neglect and duty. They had no idea that the man they were betraying had spent his entire adult life learning how to identify, track, and eliminate threats to everything he held dear. The first sign that something was wrong came when Linda tried to access their joint accounts to prove Derek's abandonment. The accounts were frozen, locked by federal orders that her attorney couldn't explain or challenge. When she tried to provide evidence of Derek's disappearance, military officials would only confirm that Colonel Thorne was unavailable for comment due to ongoing classified operations. But Linda was too deep in her plans to recognize the warning signs. She pushed forward with the divorce, confident that Derek's absence would work in her favor. Gregory had assured her that once they were married, his wealth would more than compensate for any financial difficulties Derek's legal maneuvers might cause. Neither of them realized that Derek's year of silence hadn't been abandonment. It had been preparation. Every day of his deployment, every night in hostile territory, Derek had been planning for his return. He'd been building a network of allies, gathering resources, and preparing for a war that would make his military campaigns look like practice exercises. The man who would return to face them wouldn't be the same Derek who'd kissed his family goodbye. A year of classified operations had sharpened his already formidable skills. He'd learned new techniques, made new contacts, and had been given access to resources that existed in the shadows of government operations. More importantly, Derek had discovered something during his mission that would change everything. In the depths of his classified work, he'd uncovered information about Gregory Hoffman that would make Linda's betrayal seem like a minor indiscretion in comparison. Information that would turn their carefully planned future into a nightmare they couldn't escape. As Linda prepared for the custody hearing that would give her everything she wanted, Derek was boarding a military transport that would bring him home. In his duffel bag, alongside his gear and weapons, was a single document that would destroy everything Linda and Gregory had built. A document that would prove their betrayal was just the beginning of their problems. The war was about to begin, and Derek Thorne never lost a war. Chapter 2: The Gathering Storm. Derek's return to American soil was as silent as his departure. He landed at a classified airfield in Virginia, where a black SUV waited to take him to a debriefing facility. The past year had changed him in ways that weren't immediately visible. His face carried new scars, his eyes held depths that spoke of things he could never discuss, and his body moved with the fluid precision of a man who'd spent months living on the edge of death. The debriefing took 3 days. During those 72 hours, Derek learned that his personal situation had become a matter of national security interest. His handler, a shadowy figure known only as Control, had been monitoring the situation at home. "Your wife's boyfriend is more than just a doctor," Control said, sliding a thick folder across the metal table. "Dr. Gregory Hoffman has been selling classified medical information to foreign interests. Military medical records, experimental treatments, anything he can get his hands on." Derek opened the folder, his expression never changing as he read. Gregory had been using his position at the medical center to access files of military personnel and their families. He'd been selling information about experimental treatments, psychological profiles, and medical vulnerabilities to a network of foreign agents. The operation was worth millions and had compromised the health and safety of hundreds of soldiers. "The worst part," Control continued, "is that he's been using your wife to get closer to military families. She's been his unwitting accomplice, providing him with information about your colleagues, their families, their addresses. Everything he needed to expand his operation." Derek's jaw tightened imperceptibly. "How long have you known?" We've been building the case for 8 months. We needed you to complete your mission before we could move. Now that you're back, we can proceed with the arrests. But we need your help to make sure we get everyone in the network." Derek studied the files, memorizing faces, names, and connections. The betrayal was deeper than he'd imagined. Linda hadn't just been unfaithful. She'd been compromised by a foreign intelligence operation. His children had been living with a spy who'd been using them to gather information about American military families. "What do you need me to do?" Derek asked. Control smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach his eyes. "Go to your custody hearing. Let them think they're winning. We'll be watching. When the time is right, we'll move." Derek nodded. He understood the plan, but he had modifications in mind that Control didn't need to know about. 3 days later, Derek appeared at the county courthouse. He'd deliberately chosen his dress uniform, every medal and ribbon in perfect position. He looked like exactly what he was, a decorated soldier returning from classified operations. The effect on the courthouse staff was immediate and respectful. Linda was waiting in the hallway with her attorney, Rebecca Stone. Linda had dressed carefully for the occasion, wearing a conservative black suit that was meant to convey wounded dignity. She'd lost weight during Derek's absence, and her once bright smile had been replaced by a carefully practiced expression of hurt and determination. When she saw Derek, her face went pale. The man standing before her wasn't the husband she remembered. This Derek was harder, more dangerous, and completely unreadable. For a moment, her carefully constructed confidence wavered. "Derek," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Linda," he replied, his tone neutral. He didn't ask about the children, didn't inquire about her health, didn't show any of the emotion she'd expected. His indifference was more unsettling than anger would have been. Rebecca Stone stepped forward, extending her hand. "Colonel Thorne, I'm Rebecca Stone, your wife's attorney. I hope we can resolve this matter quickly and amicably." Derek shook her hand, his grip firm but not aggressive. "I'm sure we can reach an understanding." Inside the courtroom, Judge William Hayes presided over what he believed would be a routine custody hearing. Judge Hayes was a veteran himself, having served in Vietnam before becoming a lawyer and eventually a judge. He'd seen countless military families torn apart by the demands of service and had developed a reputation for fair but firm decisions in custody cases. Linda took the stand first, her testimony carefully rehearsed. She spoke of Derek's increasing absences, his choice to prioritize military service over family, and his ultimate abandonment of his responsibilities. She painted a picture of a woman who tried desperately to hold her family together while her husband chose duty over love. "He just disappeared," she said, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. "No calls, no letters, no support. I didn't even know if he was alive. The children kept asking where their father was, and I had no answers. We were forced to move on with our lives." Rebecca Stone built on Linda's testimony, presenting evidence of Derek's absence, the lack of financial support, and Linda's need for sole custody to provide stability for the children. She painted Derek as a man who'd abandoned his family and had no right to disrupt their lives now. When it was Derek's turn to present his case, he stood and walked to the counsel table. He carried no briefcase, no stack of papers, no prepared arguments. Instead, he had a single manila envelope. "Your Honor," Derek said, his voice carrying the authority of a man accustomed to command, "I have served my country for 15 years. I have never abandoned my duty, and I have never abandoned my family." He opened the envelope and removed a single document, walking forward to place it on Judge Hayes' desk. The courtroom fell silent as the judge read the header. Derek watched as the judge's expression changed from routine attention to shock to something approaching awe. "Ma'am," Judge Hayes said, looking directly at Linda, "your husband's absence was at the direct order of the President of the United States. This is a matter of national security." Linda's face went white. The carefully constructed narrative of abandonment crumbled in an instant. But Derek wasn't finished. "Your Honor," Derek continued, "I'd like to present additional evidence that's relevant to this custody hearing." He nodded toward the back of the courtroom, where 2 federal agents had quietly entered. They moved with the practiced efficiency of law enforcement, their badges clearly visible. "Gregory Hoffman," one of the agents announced, "you're under arrest for espionage, treason, and conspiracy against the United States." The courtroom erupted in chaos as Gregory, who'd been sitting in the gallery supporting Linda, was handcuffed and led away. Linda's attorney was on her feet, objecting to everything, but Judge Hayes was reading additional documents that Derek had provided. "Mrs. Thorne," the judge said, his voice carrying the weight of authority, "these documents indicate that you've been living with and providing information to a foreign agent. You've compromised military families and endangered national security." Linda was shaking now, her carefully constructed world collapsing around her. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't know what he was doing." Derek looked at her with cold eyes. "You knew enough," he said. "You knew enough to betray your marriage, your children, and your country." The second federal agent approached Linda. "Mrs. Thorne, you're under arrest as an accessory to espionage. You have the right to remain silent." As Linda was handcuffed and led away, she turned to Derek with tears streaming down her face. "The children," she pleaded. "Please, Derek, think about the children." Derek's expression never changed. "I am thinking about the children. I'm thinking about how they've been living with a spy for the past year. I'm thinking about how they've been used as pawns in an operation against their own country. I'm thinking about how I'm going to have to explain to them that their mother is a traitor." Judge Hayes called for order in the courtroom. "Colonel Thorne," he said, "given these circumstances, I'm awarding you full custody of your children. Mrs. Thorne's parental rights are suspended pending the outcome of her federal trial." Derek nodded. "Thank you, Your Honor." As the courtroom cleared, Derek remained standing at the counsel table. He'd won the first battle, but the war was far from over. Linda and Gregory had destroyed his family, endangered his children, and betrayed their country. The federal charges would ensure they faced justice in the legal system, but Derek's sense of justice demanded more. He'd spent a year in classified operations, learning new skills and making new contacts. He'd uncovered networks of betrayal that went deeper than anyone realized. And now, with his children in his custody and his enemies in federal custody, he could begin the real work of ensuring that betrayal was answered with consequences that would last a lifetime. The man who walked out of that courthouse wasn't just a father reclaiming his children. He was a soldier who'd identified his enemies and was preparing to wage a war that would teach them that some betrayals carry prices that can never be fully paid. Chapter 3: The Price of Betrayal. The federal holding facility was a stark, unforgiving place where Linda Thorne found herself sharing a cell with women whose crimes ranged from tax evasion to international arms dealing. The reality of her situation had hit her like a physical blow. She was facing charges of accessory to espionage, conspiracy against the United States, and endangering national security. The woman who'd thought she was planning a comfortable new life with a successful doctor was now facing the possibility of spending the rest of her life in federal prison. Gregory Hoffman's situation was even more dire. As the primary target of the federal investigation, he was being held in solitary confinement while federal agents built their case against him. The sophisticated spy network he'd constructed over 5 years was being dismantled piece by piece, and his cooperation was the only thing standing between him and a life sentence. Derek spent his first week home focused on his children. Michael and Emma had been living with lies for a year, believing their father had abandoned them while growing attached to a man who'd been using them to gather intelligence on American military families. The reunion was awkward and painful, filled with confused questions and hurt feelings that would take time to heal. "Dad, why didn't you call us?" Emma asked on their second night together. She was 14 now, more mature than when he'd left, but still young enough to need her father's protection and guidance. "I couldn't, sweetheart," Derek said, choosing his words carefully. "Sometimes when you serve your country, you have to make sacrifices that hurt the people you love most. I never wanted to leave you, and I never stopped thinking about you and your brother." Michael was harder to reach. At 14, he'd been old enough to understand the implications of his father's absence and had grown bitter about what he'd perceived as abandonment. Gregory had filled that void, becoming the father figure Michael had needed during crucial months of his development. "Gregory said you chose the military over us," Michael said during a tense dinner conversation. He said real fathers don't abandon their families. Derek set down his fork and looked at his son. "Gregory was a spy, Michael. He was using our family to gather information that he sold to enemies of our country. Everything he told you was a lie designed to turn you against me so he could continue his operation." The truth was brutal, but Derek had learned that lies, even comfortable ones, only led to deeper pain. His children needed to understand the reality of what they'd been living through, even if it was difficult to accept. Over the following days, federal agents interviewed the children extensively. They needed to understand what information Gregory had gathered and how he'd used the family to expand his network. The interviews revealed the scope of Gregory's manipulation. He'd used family dinners and casual conversations to gather intelligence about Derek's colleagues, their families, and their vulnerabilities. While Derek worked to rebuild his relationship with his children, he was also planning the next phase of his campaign against those who'd betrayed him. The federal charges were just the beginning. Derek had learned during his classified operations that some forms of justice existed outside the legal system, and some betrayals demanded prices that courts couldn't impose. His first target was Rebecca Stone, Linda's attorney. Derek's investigation revealed that Stone had been aware of Gregory's criminal activities and had been paid significantly more than her standard fees to ensure the divorce proceeded quickly and quietly. She'd been planning to help Linda and Gregory disappear to a non-extradition country once the divorce was finalized. Derek's approach to Stone was subtle and devastating. Using contacts from his classified work, he arranged for Stone's other clients to learn about her involvement with foreign agents. Word spread quickly through the legal community that Stone had been compromised by enemy intelligence operations. Within 2 weeks, she'd lost every client and was facing disbarment proceedings. But Derek's most sophisticated revenge was reserved for the network of people who'd supported Linda's lies and helped her maintain her deception. These were neighbors, friends, and family members who'd chosen to believe Linda's version of events without question and had helped her isolate Derek's children from their father's memory. Derek's military training had taught him that the most effective operations were those that turned enemies against each other. He began a carefully orchestrated campaign of psychological warfare that would make Linda's supporters understand the price of betraying a soldier's family. Margaret Henley, Linda's closest friend and most vocal supporter, was the first to experience Derek's retaliation. Margaret had spread rumors about Derek's abandonment throughout their social circle and had helped Linda maintain her lies. Derek arranged for Margaret's husband to receive anonymous packages containing evidence of Margaret's own infidelities, affairs she'd been conducting while publicly supporting Linda's moral crusade against Derek. The evidence was devastating and undeniable. Within days, Margaret's marriage was destroyed, her reputation in the community was in ruins, and she was facing her own divorce proceedings. When she tried to contact Linda for support, she learned that Linda was in federal custody and unable to help anyone. Derek's campaign against Linda's support network continued systematically. Each person who'd chosen to believe Linda's lies and had helped her maintain her deception found themselves facing consequences that destroyed their carefully constructed lives. Derek used his military contacts, his intelligence training, and his understanding of human nature to identify and exploit the weaknesses of everyone who'd betrayed his family. The beauty of Derek's revenge was its precision. He didn't target innocent people or cause random destruction. Every person who faced consequences had actively participated in the betrayal of his family. They'd chosen to believe lies, spread rumors, and help isolate his children from their father's memory. Now they were learning that choices have consequences, even when those consequences come months or years later. Meanwhile, Linda's situation was deteriorating rapidly. Her federal defenders were negotiating a plea agreement that would require her to testify against Gregory and provide information about everyone who'd helped her maintain her deception. The comfortable life she'd planned with Gregory had become a nightmare of legal proceedings, federal investigations, and the growing realization that she'd destroyed everything she'd once claimed to value. Gregory's situation was even worse. The federal investigation had uncovered the full scope of his espionage activities, including the sale of medical information that had led to the deaths of American soldiers overseas. He was facing multiple life sentences and the possibility of execution for treason. His sophisticated spy network had been completely dismantled, and his foreign contacts had abandoned him to face American justice alone. Derek visited Linda in federal custody exactly once. The meeting took place in a sterile conference room under the supervision of federal marshals. Linda had aged years in the few weeks since her arrest. Her hair was unkempt, her face was drawn, and her once confident demeanor had been replaced by desperate fear. "Derek, please," she begged, tears streaming down her face. "I know I made mistakes, but I never meant for this to happen. I never knew Gregory was a spy. I just wanted to be happy." Derek looked at her with the same cold expression he'd worn in the courtroom. "You wanted to be happy," he repeated. "So you destroyed our marriage, betrayed our children, and helped a foreign agent gather intelligence on American military families. Your definition of happiness required the destruction of everything I held sacred." "The children need their mother," Linda pleaded. "Whatever you think of me, they need." "The children need to be protected from traitors," Derek interrupted. "They need to understand that choices have consequences and that loyalty isn't negotiable. You chose Gregory over your family. You chose lies over truth. Now you'll live with those choices." Derek stood to leave, then paused at the door. "I want you to understand something, Linda. The federal charges are just the beginning. You destroyed my family and endangered my children. The government will punish you for your crimes against the country. But I will ensure you understand the personal cost of betraying a soldier's family." As Derek walked away from the federal facility, he was already planning the next phase of his campaign. Linda and Gregory would spend the rest of their lives in federal prison, but their extended network of supporters and enablers would face a different kind of justice. They would learn that some men never forgive, never forget, and never stop fighting for what they believe in. The war Derek had declared on his family's betrayers was entering its most sophisticated phase. His enemies had underestimated the man they'd betrayed, assuming that his honor and his commitment to legal justice would limit his response to their betrayal. They were about to learn that a soldier's honor didn't prevent him from using every weapon at his disposal to protect what he held sacred. The foundation of their comfortable lives was about to crumble, and Derek Thorne would be the architect of their destruction. Chapter 4. The Network Unravels. 2 months after the custody hearing, Derek's systematic dismantling of Linda's support network had reached its full momentum. What had begun as targeted retaliation against specific individuals had evolved into a comprehensive operation that demonstrated the reach and sophistication of Derek's capabilities. Every person who had participated in the campaign against his family was discovering that their past choices carried present consequences. Dr. Patricia Vance, Linda's sister and a prominent psychiatrist, had been one of the most vocal supporters of Linda's narrative. She'd used her professional credentials to publicly question Derek's fitness as a father and had written letters to the court describing him as an absent parent who prioritized military service over family obligations. Patricia had believed her professional reputation and social standing made her untouchable. Derek's response was clinical in its precision. Using his intelligence contacts, he arranged for Patricia's professional activities to be scrutinized by medical boards and ethics committees. The investigation revealed that Patricia had been prescribing medications to patients without proper evaluation, had been conducting unauthorized research using patient data, and had been billing insurance companies for services never provided. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Patricia's medical license was suspended, her research was discredited, and she was facing criminal charges for insurance fraud. Her prestigious career was destroyed, her reputation was in ruins, and she was confronting the possibility of prison time. When she tried to contact Derek to negotiate some form of resolution, she learned that he wasn't interested in her explanations or her apologies. Robert Chun, Linda's divorce attorney's assistant, had been instrumental in building the case against Derek. He'd helped gather evidence of Derek's absence, had researched military regulations to find ways to challenge Derek's classified status, and had worked overtime to ensure the divorce proceedings moved quickly. Robert had seen Derek as just another absent soldier whose wife deserved better treatment. Derek's investigation revealed that Robert had been selling confidential client information to private investigators and rival law firms. The evidence showed years of systematic breach of attorney-client privilege, with Robert profiting from sensitive information about custody cases, divorces, and family disputes. When Derek presented this evidence to the State Bar Association, Robert's career in law was finished immediately. But Derek's most sophisticated operation was reserved for the social network that had embraced Linda's story and had helped her maintain her deception within their community. These were the neighbors, friends, and acquaintances who had chosen to believe Linda's version of events without question and had helped spread the narrative that Derek had abandoned his family. The centerpiece of this network was the Riverside Hills Homeowners Association, an influential group that controlled much of the social and economic activity in Derek's neighborhood. The association had been dominated by a clique of wealthy wives who had embraced Linda as a victim of military neglect and had used her story to support their own complaints about absent husbands and family priorities. Derek's approach to the Homeowners Association was a masterpiece of psychological warfare. He began by identifying the association's financial vulnerabilities, questionable expenditures, unauthorized projects, and personal use of association funds by board members. Then he systematically exposed these problems to the broader community, using his understanding of group dynamics to turn members against each other. The association president, Jennifer Walsh, had been Linda's closest ally and most vocal supporter. She'd organized support groups for abandoned military wives and had publicly criticized Derek's character and parenting abilities. Jennifer had believed her social position and community influence made her immune to retaliation. Derek arranged for Jennifer's husband to receive detailed evidence of her extensive affair with the association's landscaping contractor. The evidence included photographs, financial records showing association funds used to pay for romantic getaways, and recordings of conversations planning their future together. Jennifer's marriage collapsed within days. Her position in the association was terminated, and she was facing lawsuits from multiple parties. The beauty of Derek's operation was that each revelation created additional chaos and suspicion within the group. As members discovered that their leaders had been corrupt and deceptive, they began questioning everything they'd been told, including the story about Derek's abandonment of his family. The social network that had supported Linda's lies began to crumble as trust and loyalty gave way to suspicion and self-preservation. Derek's children watched these developments with growing understanding of what their father was capable of when his family was threatened. Michael, who had initially been hostile to Derek's return, began to appreciate the methodical nature of his father's response to betrayal. Emma, always more intuitive than her brother, recognized that their father's actions were driven by love and protection, even when those actions seemed harsh. "Dad," Emma said one evening as they reviewed homework together, "are you going to keep doing this to everyone who believed Mom's story?" Derek looked at his daughter, choosing his words carefully. "I'm going to make sure that everyone who participated in hurting our family understands that their choices had consequences. Some people think they can lie about soldiers and military families without facing any results. They need to learn that's not true." "But when will it stop?" Emma asked. "When I'm satisfied that everyone who betrayed us has paid an appropriate price for their choices," Derek replied. "When I'm confident that no one will try to hurt our family again." Meanwhile, Linda's situation in federal custody had become increasingly desperate. Her attorneys were pushing for a plea agreement that would require her to provide testimony against Gregory and his entire network. The federal prosecutors were offering a reduced sentence in exchange for her cooperation, but even the reduced sentence would mean decades in prison. Gregory's situation was hopeless. The federal investigation had revealed that his espionage activities had resulted in the deaths of American soldiers overseas. The medical information he'd sold to foreign agents had been used to target military personnel and their families. He was facing multiple death sentences and had no bargaining power with prosecutors. During his second and final visit to Linda in federal custody, Derek brought photographs of their children's recent activities, school events, sports games, and family dinners. Linda looked at the pictures with tears streaming down her face, understanding that she was seeing a life she would never be part of again. "They're doing well," Derek said, his voice neutral. "They're beginning to understand what really happened and why. They're learning to trust me again." "Derek, please," Linda whispered. "I know I can never fix what I've done, but please don't turn them against me completely. I'm still their mother." Derek looked at her with the same cold expression she'd seen in the courtroom. "You stopped being their mother when you chose to betray their father and endanger their safety. You're a traitor to your country and your family. That's how they'll remember you." "The children will hate you for this," Linda said, desperation creeping into her voice. "When they're older, they'll understand that you destroyed their mother's life." Derek smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach his eyes. "The children will understand that I protected them from a traitor and a spy. They'll understand that I eliminated threats to their safety and their future. They'll understand that loyalty and honor aren't negotiable, and that betrayal carries a price that must be paid." As Derek walked away from the federal facility for the final time, he was already planning the next phase of his operation. Linda and Gregory would spend the rest of their lives in federal prison, but their extended network of supporters still needed to understand the full consequences of their choices. The war Derek had declared was entering its final phase, but the most devastating attacks were yet to come. His enemies had underestimated not just his capabilities, but his commitment to ensuring that betrayal was answered with consequences that would last for generations. The foundation of every comfortable life built on the betrayal of his family was about to crumble completely, and Derek Thorne would be the architect of their absolute destruction. Chapter 5. The Reckoning Deepens. 6 months after the custody hearing, Derek's campaign had evolved from targeted retaliation into a comprehensive demonstration of what happened when a military strategist decided that certain betrayals demanded permanent consequences. The network of people who had supported Linda's deception was discovering that their comfortable lives had been built on foundations that Derek could destroy at will. The most devastating phase of Derek's operation targeted the financial stability of his enemies. Using his intelligence contacts and military network, Derek had identified the economic vulnerabilities of everyone who had participated in the campaign against his family. What followed was a systematic destruction of careers, investments, and financial security that demonstrated the reach of Derek's capabilities. Thomas Brennan, the mortgage broker who had helped Linda hide assets and plan for her new life with Gregory, found himself facing federal investigation for mortgage fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. Derek had provided federal authorities with evidence showing that Brennan had been facilitating illegal financial transactions for multiple clients, including several with connections to foreign intelligence operations. The investigation revealed that Brennan's entire business model was built on criminal activity. He lost his license, his assets were frozen, and he was facing decades in federal prison. His family lost their home, their savings, and their place in the community. When Brennan attempted to contact Derek to negotiate some form of resolution, he learned that Derek wasn't interested in deals or compromises. Sandra Mitchell, the family court counselor who had supported Linda's custody petition and had written reports questioning Derek's fitness as a parent, discovered that her professional credibility had been systematically destroyed. Derek's investigation revealed that Mitchell had been taking bribes from attorneys to influence her recommendations in custody cases. The evidence was overwhelming and had been building for months. Mitchell's reports in dozens of cases were called into question, leading to appeals and reversals that destroyed families and damaged children. She lost her position, her professional certifications, and faced criminal charges for corruption. The children she had claimed to protect had been used as pawns in her money-making scheme. But Derek's most sophisticated attack was reserved for the network of military wives who had embraced Linda's story and had used it to support their own complaints about military service and family sacrifice. These women had created a support group that publicly criticized military families and had used Derek's situation as an example of military neglect and abandonment. Derek's response was to expose the hypocrisy and criminal activity within their own families. Using his military intelligence contacts, he arranged for their husbands' commanding officers to receive detailed information about activities that violated military regulations and federal laws. Colonel James Morrison's wife, Helen, had been one of Linda's most vocal supporters and had used Derek's story in presentations about military family dysfunction. Derek's investigation revealed that Helen had been running an illegal gambling operation on the military base, using her position as a colonel's wife to recruit customers and avoid detection. The investigation expanded to reveal a network of illegal activities among military wives, including drug distribution, prostitution, and theft of military property. Helen and her associates were arrested in a coordinated operation that made national news and destroyed the reputation of everyone involved. Derek's children watched these developments with growing understanding of their father's capabilities and his commitment to protecting their family. Michael, now 15, had come to appreciate the methodical nature of his father's response to betrayal. He understood that their father wasn't acting out of anger or revenge, but out of a calculated determination to ensure that threats to their family were permanently eliminated. "Dad," Michael said one evening as they worked on a school project together, "some of my friends' parents are asking questions about what's happening to all these people. They're scared." Derek looked up from the project, meeting his son's eyes. Fear is a natural response when people realize their actions have consequences. The people who are facing problems now made choices to hurt our family. They thought there would be no price to pay for their betrayal. But when does it end? Michael asked. When I'm satisfied that everyone understands the cost of betraying a soldier's family, Derek replied. When I'm confident that no one will ever again think they can destroy what we've built without facing permanent consequences. Emma, now more mature at 15, had developed a deeper understanding of the situation. Dad, Mom's trial is starting next month. Are you going to testify? Derek nodded. I'll testify about the damage her betrayal caused to our family and to national security. The jury needs to understand that her choices weren't just personal failures. They were acts of treason that endangered American soldiers and their families. The federal trial of Linda Thorne and Gregory Hoffman had become a media sensation. The case involved espionage, treason, and a network of corruption that had reached into military communities, medical facilities, and legal offices. Derek's role as both victim and key witness had made him a central figure in a story that captured national attention. Linda's defense attorneys were attempting to portray her as an innocent victim who had been manipulated by Gregory. They argued that she was a lonely military wife who had been seduced by a sophisticated spy and had unknowingly provided information that was used against her country. The strategy required painting Derek as an absent husband whose neglect had created the circumstances that led to Linda's betrayal. Derek's testimony destroyed that narrative completely. He appeared in court in full dress uniform, every medal and ribbon in perfect position. His testimony was precise, factual, and devastating. He described Linda's systematic betrayal of their marriage, her deliberate choice to provide Gregory with information about military families, and her active participation in a campaign to destroy Derek's relationship with their children. Mrs. Thorne made conscious choices to betray her marriage, her children, and her country, Derek testified. She wasn't a victim of manipulation. She was an active participant in an operation designed to harm American military personnel and their families. She chose personal pleasure over national security, and she continued making those choices even when she understood the consequences. The prosecutor presented evidence showing that Linda had been aware of Gregory's suspicious activities and had chosen to ignore red flags that would have been obvious to any reasonable person. Phone records showed conversations where Linda had discussed the need to be careful and to keep their relationship secret from the wrong people. Financial records showed that Linda had received expensive gifts and payments that far exceeded what a doctor's salary could support. Most damaging was evidence that Linda had actively recruited other military wives to provide information to Gregory. She had organized social events specifically designed to gather intelligence about military families, their schedules, their vulnerabilities, and their personal information. The network she had helped create had compromised the security of dozens of military personnel and their families. Gregory's defense was even more hopeless. The evidence against him was overwhelming and undeniable. Phone calls to foreign contacts, financial transactions with enemy agents, and detailed records of the intelligence he had provided to hostile nations. His sophisticated spy network had been completely exposed, and his cooperation was the only thing preventing him from facing immediate execution. During the trial, Derek's systematic destruction of Linda's support network continued. Each day brought new revelations about the corruption and criminal activity of people who had participated in the campaign against Derek's family. The media coverage of these parallel investigations created a narrative that Derek was not just a victim seeking justice, but a force of nature eliminating threats to military families everywhere. Judge Margaret Foster, who presided over the federal trial, had served as a military attorney before becoming a federal judge. She understood the implications of the case and the broader threat that Gregory's network had posed to national security. Her rulings consistently favored the prosecution, and her comments from the bench made clear that she viewed Linda and Gregory's actions as among the most serious crimes that could be committed against the United States. This case involves more than adultery or family dysfunction, Judge Foster stated during jury instructions. The defendants participated in activities that directly threatened the lives and safety of American military personnel and their families. Their actions constitute treason of the highest order, and the consequences must reflect the severity of their crimes. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all counts. Linda was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Gregory was sentenced to death, with execution scheduled for the following year. The extensive network of accomplices faced sentences ranging from decades in prison to life imprisonment. Derek sat in the courtroom as the sentences were read, his expression never changing. Justice had been served in the legal system, but his personal campaign was far from complete. The people who had supported Linda's lies and had helped her maintain her deception still needed to understand the full consequences of their choices. As Derek left the courthouse, reporters surrounded him seeking comments on the verdicts and the broader investigation into Linda's support network. Derek's response was measured and deliberate. Linda Thorne and Gregory Hoffman chose to betray their country and endanger military families, he said. They've now faced the legal consequences of those choices. Everyone who participated in their network of deception and betrayal will face appropriate consequences as well. Loyalty isn't negotiable, and betrayal carries a price that must be paid. Chapter 6. The Final Gambit. 1 year after the federal trial, Derek's campaign had achieved something remarkable. It had become a cautionary tale that resonated throughout military communities and beyond. The systematic destruction of Linda's support network had sent a message that betraying a military family carried consequences that extended far beyond legal proceedings. Derek had created a legend around his name that would protect military families for generations to come. The final phase of Derek's operation was the most personal and the most devastating. He had saved his most sophisticated revenge for the people who had directly participated in turning his children against him. These were the individuals who had filled Michael and Emma's minds with lies about their father, who had encouraged them to see Derek as an abandoning parent rather than a serving soldier. Dr. Amanda Foster, the children's school counselor, had been instrumental in supporting Linda's narrative within the school system. She had provided emotional counseling to Michael and Emma that reinforced the idea that their father had chosen military service over family responsibility. She had written reports documenting the children's emotional distress and had recommended limiting Derek's parental rights based on his pattern of abandonment. Derek's investigation revealed that Foster had been systematically manipulating vulnerable children for years, using her position to implant ideas and emotions that served her personal agenda. She had been receiving payments from divorce attorneys to provide testimony that supported their clients' custody cases, regardless of the truth or the best interests of the children involved. The evidence was overwhelming. Foster had violated every ethical standard of her profession, had damaged countless children and families, and had profited from the destruction of family relationships. When Derek presented this evidence to school administrators and professional licensing boards, Foster's career was destroyed immediately. She faced criminal charges for child abuse and corruption, and every case she had ever worked on was called into question. But Derek's most devastating attack was reserved for the person who had done the most damage to his relationship with his children, Linda's mother, Dorothy Rodriguez. Dorothy had been living in Derek's house during his deployment, serving as the children's primary caregiver and filling their minds with poisonous lies about their father. Dorothy had convinced Michael and Emma that Derek had abandoned them permanently, that he had chosen military glory over family responsibility, and that Gregory was a better father figure who truly cared about their well-being. She had systematically erased Derek's presence from the household, removing photographs, military memorabilia, and anything that reminded the children of their father's service and sacrifice. Derek's response to Dorothy was personal and devastating. Using his intelligence contacts, he arranged for Dorothy to be investigated for immigration fraud, tax evasion, and identity theft. The investigation revealed that Dorothy had been living in the United States illegally for over 20 years, had been using false documents to obtain employment and benefits, and had been involved in a network of illegal immigrants who were committing various crimes. The evidence was undeniable, and Dorothy's arrest was swift and public. She was deported to Mexico within weeks, losing everything she had built in America and facing criminal charges in multiple jurisdictions. Her removal from the children's lives was immediate and permanent, eliminating the primary source of poison that had been turned against Derek. But Derek's most sophisticated operation was still to come. He had identified a network of corruption within the family court system that had enabled Linda's lies and had nearly cost him his relationship with his children. This network included judges, attorneys, court officers, and social workers who had been taking bribes and manipulating cases for personal profit. Derek's military intelligence training had taught him how to identify and exploit systemic corruption. Working with federal authorities, he had been building a case against the family court network for over a year. The investigation involved wiretaps, financial surveillance, and undercover operations that revealed the scope of corruption within the system. The culmination of this investigation was a coordinated federal raid that arrested dozens of court officials, attorneys, and support personnel. The charges ranged from bribery and corruption to racketeering and conspiracy. The entire family court system was revealed to be a criminal enterprise that had been destroying families and damaging children for financial profit. Judge Patricia Williams, who had initially presided over Derek's custody case before recusing herself, was arrested for taking bribes from attorneys and manipulating case outcomes. Her corruption had affected hundreds of families and had caused immeasurable damage to children and parents who had trusted the system to protect their interests. The investigation revealed that Linda's case had been part of a broader pattern of corruption designed to favor certain attorneys and their clients. Rebecca Stone, Linda's attorney, had been paying bribes to ensure favorable rulings in her cases, and Derek's situation had been manipulated from the beginning to ensure Linda would receive custody and financial support. Derek's testimony in the family court corruption trial was devastating. He described how the system had been rigged against military families, how judges and attorneys had conspired to punish soldiers for their service, and how children had been used as pawns in a money-making scheme that destroyed families for profit. The corruption in this court system represents a betrayal of every family that trusted it to protect their children, Derek testified. These officials took bribes to destroy families, manipulate children, and punish parents who served their country. They turned the family court into a criminal enterprise that damaged everyone it touched. The trial resulted in dozens of convictions and prison sentences. The entire family court system was restructured, with new oversight and accountability measures designed to prevent future corruption. Derek's role in exposing the corruption made him a hero to military families and a symbol of the fight against systemic betrayal. As the various trials and investigations concluded, Derek's children had grown into young adults who understood the full scope of what their father had accomplished. Michael, now 16, had developed a deep respect for his father's commitment to justice and his refusal to accept betrayal without consequences. "Dad," Michael said one evening as they reviewed college applications together, "I understand now why you did everything you did. You weren't just protecting us. You were protecting every military family that could have been hurt by these people." Emma, also 16, had developed her own understanding of the situation. "You taught us that loyalty isn't just a word, and that standing up for what's right sometimes means fighting battles that other people don't understand." Derek looked at his children with pride. They had survived betrayal, corruption, and systematic attempts to poison their minds against their father. They had emerged stronger, wiser, and more committed to the values that Derek had tried to instill in them from birth. "The most important lesson," Derek said, "is that some battles are worth fighting regardless of the cost. When people try to destroy your family, betray your trust, or harm the people you love, you don't negotiate or compromise. You fight until the threat is eliminated completely." Linda remained in federal prison, serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Gregory had been executed 6 months earlier, his death marking the end of the spy network that had threatened American military families. Dorothy had been deported and banned from returning to the United States. The network of corruption that had enabled their betrayal had been destroyed completely. Derek had achieved something unprecedented. He had not only protected his family from betrayal, but had eliminated the systemic threats that could have harmed other military families in the future. His campaign had become legendary within military communities, a cautionary tale that would protect soldiers and their families for generations to come. The man who had returned from classified operations to find his family destroyed by betrayal had rebuilt his life and had created a legacy that would endure long after the immediate threats had been eliminated. Derek Thorne had proven that some men never forgive, never forget, and never stop fighting for what they believe in. His war was over, but his victory was permanent. Chapter 7: The Inheritance of Honor. 2 years after the final trials concluded, Derek's children had graduated high school and were preparing for college. The house that had once been filled with lies and betrayal had become a home again, strengthened by the shared understanding of what they had survived together. Michael and Emma had grown into young adults who carried their father's values and understood the price of loyalty and the consequences of betrayal. Derek had spent the past year documenting everything that had happened, creating a comprehensive record of the betrayal his family had faced and the methods he had used to eliminate the threats against them. This documentation served multiple purposes. It was a training manual for other military families facing similar situations, a cautionary tale for those who might consider betraying soldiers, and a legacy for his children that would guide them throughout their lives. The impact of Derek's campaign had extended far beyond his personal situation. Military communities across the country had adopted new protocols for protecting families during deployments. Support networks had been restructured to prevent the kind of systematic betrayal that Linda had orchestrated. Family court systems had implemented oversight measures designed to prevent corruption and protect military families from judicial bias. Derek's name had become synonymous with the principle that betraying a military family carried consequences that would last for generations. His story was taught in military leadership courses as an example of strategic thinking and systematic problem-solving. Intelligence agencies studied his methods as examples of how to identify and eliminate threats to national security. But for Derek, the most important outcome was the relationship he had rebuilt with his children. Michael and Emma had not only forgiven him for the harsh methods he had used to protect them, they had come to understand that those methods had been necessary to ensure their safety and their future. Michael had been accepted to West Point, following in his father's footsteps with a commitment to military service that had been strengthened by his understanding of what soldiers sacrificed for their country. His application essay had described the lessons he had learned about loyalty, honor, and the price of betrayal. His interview had impressed the academy officials with his maturity and his understanding of military values. "Dad," Michael said as they prepared for his departure to West Point, "I want you to know that everything you did to protect our family has made me a better person. I understand now that being a soldier means more than just serving your country. It means protecting the people who depend on you, no matter what the cost." Emma had been accepted to Georgetown University with plans to study international relations and eventually join the State Department. Her understanding of espionage, betrayal, and national security had been shaped by her family's experience, and she was committed to serving her country in the diplomatic arena. "I want to help prevent the kind of threats that our family faced," Emma said. "I want to work in intelligence and counterintelligence so that other families don't have to go through what we went through." Derek looked at his children with pride and satisfaction. They had not only survived the betrayal and corruption that had tried to destroy their family, they had emerged stronger and more committed to the values that he had tried to instill in them. They understood that loyalty wasn't negotiable, that betrayal carried permanent consequences, and that some battles were worth fighting regardless of the personal cost. The final chapter of Derek's campaign came when he received a letter from Linda in federal prison. She had been serving her life sentence for 2 years and had apparently spent that time reflecting on her choices and their consequences. The letter was filled with apologies, regrets, and pleas for some form of forgiveness or reconciliation. Linda wrote about her loneliness in prison, her regret for the choices she had made, and her desperate desire to somehow rebuild a relationship with the children she would never see again. She claimed to have found religion, to have developed a new understanding of loyalty and family, and to have learned the error of her ways through years of reflection and suffering. Derek read the letter once and then burned it without responding. Linda's regrets and apologies were meaningless to him. She had made conscious choices to betray her family and her country, and those choices had permanent consequences that could never be reversed. Her suffering in prison was the price she had agreed to pay when she chose Gregory over her family, lies over truth, and personal pleasure over national security. The final test of Derek's values came when Michael and Emma asked him about their mother's letter. They had learned about it through prison officials who had hoped Derek might allow some form of contact between Linda and her children. Both Michael and Emma were curious about their mother's situation and wondered if some form of limited relationship might be possible. Derek's response was clear and uncompromising. "Your mother made choices that destroyed our family and endangered your safety. She chose to betray her marriage, her children, and her country. Those choices have permanent consequences that cannot be reversed by apologies or regrets. She is a traitor, and traitors don't deserve forgiveness or reconciliation. But she's still our mother, Emma said quietly. She stopped being your mother when she chose to betray your father and endanger your lives, Derek replied. Biology doesn't create family, loyalty does. Choice does. Honor does. Your mother chose to abandon those values, and she chose to abandon you when she made that decision. Derek's children accepted his decision without argument. They had learned to trust their father's judgment and to understand that his harsh responses to betrayal were motivated by love and protection rather than cruelty or revenge. They understood that Derek's refusal to forgive wasn't based on personal anger, but on the principle that some actions carried consequences that could never be reversed. As Derek prepared to send his children off to college, he reflected on everything that had happened and everything he had accomplished. He had faced betrayal that would have destroyed most men, but he had responded with strategic thinking, systematic planning, and unwavering commitment to protecting his family. The network of people who had betrayed his family had been completely destroyed. Linda would spend the rest of her life in federal prison. Gregory had been executed for treason. The corruption within the family court system had been eliminated. The support network that had enabled Linda's deception had been dismantled piece by piece. More importantly, Derek had rebuilt his relationship with his children and had taught them lessons about loyalty, honor, and consequences that would guide them throughout their lives. They understood that betrayal was unforgivable, that loyalty was non-negotiable, and that protecting family required whatever methods were necessary to eliminate threats. Derek's legacy was secure. His story would be told in military communities for generations, a cautionary tale about the consequences of betraying a soldier's family. His methods would be studied by intelligence agencies and law enforcement organizations as examples of systematic threat elimination. His values would be carried forward by his children and their children, ensuring that the lessons of loyalty and honor would endure. The man who had returned from classified operations to find his family destroyed by betrayal had rebuilt his life and had created something permanent and unbreakable. Derek Thorne had proven that some men never forgive, never forget, and never stop fighting for what they believe in. His war was over, but his victory would last forever. Chapter 8. The Wider War. 5 years after the final trials, Derek's campaign had evolved from personal revenge into something much larger, a systematic transformation of how military families were protected and how betrayal was addressed within military communities. Derek had been approached by senior Pentagon officials who wanted to formalize his methods and create new protocols for protecting military families from the kinds of threats his family had faced. Derek's consulting work with the Department of Defense had led to the creation of new intelligence units specifically designed to identify and eliminate threats to military families. His expertise in counterintelligence, psychological operations, and systematic threat elimination had become invaluable to military leadership who understood that protecting soldiers meant protecting their families as well. The Thorne Protocols, as they had come to be known within military circles, provided comprehensive guidance for identifying, investigating, and eliminating threats to military families. These protocols included everything from financial security measures to counterintelligence operations to systematic response strategies for situations involving betrayal or compromise. Derek's work had also led to the creation of new legal frameworks for prosecuting crimes against military families. Federal legislation had been passed that created enhanced penalties for espionage activities targeting military personnel, corruption within family court systems, and systematic campaigns designed to destroy military families. Michael had graduated from West Point with highest honors and had been commissioned as a second lieutenant in Army intelligence. His undergraduate thesis had been a detailed analysis of his father's campaign, examining the strategic thinking and tactical execution that had led to the complete elimination of threats to their family. The thesis had become required reading at the academy and had established Michael as a rising star in military intelligence. Emma had graduated from Georgetown with degrees in international relations and intelligence studies. She had been recruited by the CIA immediately upon graduation and was working in counterintelligence operations designed to protect American interests overseas. Her understanding of espionage networks and systematic betrayal had made her invaluable in identifying and eliminating foreign intelligence operations targeting American personnel. Both of Derek's children had internalized the lessons their father had taught them about loyalty, honor, and the permanent consequences of betrayal. They had become leaders in their respective fields, carrying forward the values that Derek had instilled in them, and applying those values to protect other American families from the kinds of threats they had faced. The impact of Derek's campaign extended far beyond his immediate family. Military divorce rates had declined significantly as potential betrayers understood the consequences of targeting military families. Family court corruption had been virtually eliminated through new oversight measures and the understanding that crimes against military families would be prosecuted with unprecedented severity. Foreign intelligence operations targeting American military personnel had been disrupted repeatedly as enemy agents learned that compromising military families led to systematic retaliation that destroyed entire networks. Derek's reputation had become a deterrent that protected American interests around the world. But Derek's most important achievement was the cultural transformation he had created within military communities. The understanding that betraying a military family carried permanent consequences had created a new standard of loyalty and support that strengthened military families across all branches of service. The annual Thorn Foundation dinner had become the premier event for military families, bringing together thousands of soldiers and their families to celebrate loyalty, honor, and the sacrifice that military service required. Derek's speech at each year's dinner reinforced the values that had guided his campaign and continued to guide military families in their daily lives. Military families face unique challenges and unique threats, Derek said at the most recent dinner. We deploy to dangerous places, we serve in classified operations, and we make sacrifices that civilian families cannot understand. Those sacrifices make us vulnerable to people who would exploit our service for their own benefit. But we also have unique strengths, Derek continued. We have training, resources, and networks that allow us to protect our families in ways that civilian families cannot. We have the ability to identify threats, investigate betrayal, and eliminate dangers before they can destroy what we hold most dear. The most important lesson my family learned is that betrayal is not a mistake or a moment of weakness. It is a choice that carries permanent consequences. People who choose to betray military families must understand that they are declaring war on people who are uniquely qualified to fight and win that war. Derek's foundation provided resources and support for military families facing betrayal, corruption, or systematic threats. The foundation's legal team specialized in military family law and had achieved unprecedented success in protecting military families from court bias and systematic discrimination. The foundation's intelligence unit provided counterintelligence support for military families who suspected they were being targeted by foreign operations. Most importantly, the foundation provided training and education that helped military families identify and respond to threats before those threats could cause significant damage. The training included everything from financial security measures to counterintelligence techniques to legal strategies for protecting military families from court corruption. Derek's children had become active in the foundation's work, using their own expertise and experience to help other military families. Michael's intelligence background allowed him to identify and investigate threats to military families, while Emma's counterintelligence experience helped families protect themselves from foreign intelligence operations. The Foundation's most successful program was its Family Security Assessment, which provided comprehensive evaluation of threats and vulnerabilities facing individual military families. The assessment included financial security reviews, background investigations of associates and friends, counterintelligence evaluations, and legal protection strategies. Families who completed the assessment received detailed reports identifying potential threats and specific recommendations for protecting themselves from betrayal, corruption, and systematic attack. The program had prevented dozens of situations similar to what Derek's family had faced, protecting military families before betrayal could occur. Derek's personal life had found a new equilibrium based on the understanding that protecting his family required constant vigilance and systematic preparation. He had never remarried, choosing instead to focus on his children, his work, and his mission to protect other military families from the threats his family had faced. His relationship with his children had become stronger than ever, built on shared understanding of what they had survived together and mutual commitment to the values that had guided Derek's campaign. Michael and Emma regularly sought their father's advice on both personal and professional matters, understanding that Derek's experience and judgment had been proven through the most challenging circumstances. Derek's social circle consisted entirely of people who had proven their loyalty and their commitment to military families. He had no tolerance for casual relationships or superficial friendships, understanding that trust was something that had to be earned and constantly demonstrated. The house where Linda had lived with Gregory for a year had been completely renovated and transformed into a monument to military family values. Every room contained reminders of the sacrifice and service that military families provided to their country. The walls were covered with photographs of military families, awards recognizing service and sacrifice, and documents commemorating the victories that Derek's campaign had achieved. Derek's study contained detailed files on every person who had participated in the betrayal of his family and comprehensive documentation of the consequences they had faced. These files served as both a historical record and a warning to anyone who might consider targeting military families in the future. The message was clear. Betraying a military family meant declaring war on people who were uniquely qualified to fight and win that war. Derek Thorne had proven that some battles were worth fighting regardless of the cost, and that some victories were permanent. Chapter 9. The Eternal Vigil. 10 years after Derek's return from Operation Darkwater, his transformation from betrayed husband to legendary protector of military families was complete. The Thorne name had become synonymous with unwavering loyalty and the absolute certainty that betraying a military family would result in systematic and permanent consequences. Derek's legacy was not just personal vindication. It was a cultural revolution that had fundamentally changed how military families were protected and how threats against them were addressed. Derek, now 48, had achieved something unprecedented in modern American society. He had taken a personal betrayal that would have destroyed most men and had transformed it into a systematic campaign that protected military families across the entire country. His methods had been studied, adopted, and institutionalized at the highest levels of government and military leadership. The Department of Defense had formally adopted the Thorne Protocols as standard procedure for protecting military families from foreign intelligence operations, court corruption, and systematic betrayal. Every military installation in the world now had Thorne Protocol specialists who were trained to identify, investigate, and eliminate threats to military families before those threats could cause damage. Derek's consulting work with federal law enforcement agencies had led to the creation of specialized units within the FBI, CIA, and NSA that focused specifically on crimes against military families. These units had unprecedented authority to investigate and prosecute anyone who targeted military families, and their success rate in eliminating threats was nearly perfect. The Thorne Standard had become the benchmark for loyalty within military communities. Military personnel who demonstrated Thorne Standard loyalty to their families and their comrades were fast-tracked for promotion and given access to the most prestigious assignments. Personnel who failed to meet the Thorne Standard were removed from sensitive positions and closely monitored for potential security risks. Michael Thorne, now 24, had become one of the youngest majors in Army intelligence history. His expertise in counterintelligence and systematic threat elimination had made him indispensable to senior military leadership. He was currently stationed at the Pentagon, where he worked directly with Derek on developing new protocols for protecting military families from emerging threats. Michael's marriage to Sarah Chun, a fellow Army intelligence officer, had been conducted according to strict security protocols designed to prevent the kind of infiltration that had nearly destroyed Derek's family. Both Michael and Sarah had undergone comprehensive background investigations, financial security evaluations, and psychological assessments to ensure their loyalty and their commitment to military family values. Emma Thorne, also 24, had become one of the CIA's most successful counterintelligence operatives. Her work focused on identifying and eliminating foreign intelligence networks that targeted American military families. She had been instrumental in disrupting dozens of operations and had developed new techniques for protecting military families from foreign infiltration. Emma remained unmarried by choice, having learned from her father that trust was something that had to be earned over years of demonstrated loyalty. She maintained relationships only with people who had been thoroughly investigated and who had proven their commitment to American values and military family protection. Both of Derek's children had inherited their father's absolute intolerance for betrayal and his systematic approach to eliminating threats. They understood that protecting military families required constant vigilance, comprehensive preparation, and the willingness to use whatever methods were necessary to eliminate threats before they could cause damage. The Thorn Foundation had grown into a multi-million-dollar organization that provided comprehensive protection services for military families worldwide. The foundation operated training centers, legal support services, financial security programs, and counterintelligence operations that protected thousands of military families from threats they might never even realize they faced. Derek's annual address to the foundation had become the most important speech in the military family community. His words were studied, memorized, and applied by military families who understood that Derek's experience and wisdom could protect them from threats that had destroyed families throughout military history. 10 years ago, my family faced betrayal that was designed to destroy everything we had built together, Derek said in his most recent address. That betrayal came from people we trusted, people we loved, and people we believed shared our values and our commitment to family and country. But betrayal taught us something important about the nature of loyalty and the price of trust. We learned that some people will exploit our service, our sacrifice, and our vulnerability for their own benefit. We learned that protecting military families requires more than just good intentions. It requires systematic preparation, constant vigilance, and the absolute certainty that threats will be eliminated completely. Today, military families are safer than they have ever been in American history. Foreign intelligence operations targeting military families have been disrupted and eliminated. Court corruption has been virtually eliminated through new oversight and accountability measures. The support networks that enable betrayal have been identified and dismantled. But our work is not finished. New threats emerge constantly, and new methods of betrayal are developed by people who underestimate our commitment to protecting military families. We must remain vigilant. We must continue to prepare, and we must never forget that the price of freedom is eternal vigilance, not just against foreign enemies, but against the domestic threats that would exploit our service for their own benefit. Derek's personal life had achieved a balance that reflected his understanding of trust, loyalty, and the permanent consequences of betrayal. He had never remarried, choosing instead to focus on his mission to protect military families and his role as father to children who carried forward his values and his commitment to service. His social relationships were limited to people who had proven their loyalty through years of demonstrated commitment to military family values. These relationships were deep, meaningful, and built on shared understanding of what military service required and what betrayal cost. Derek's home had become a shrine to military family values and a monument to the consequences of betrayal. Every room contained reminders of the sacrifice that military families made for their country and the victories that Derek's campaign had achieved in protecting those families from threats. The study where Derek had planned his campaign against Linda's betrayal had been preserved exactly as it was during the height of his operations. The files, photographs, and documents that had guided his systematic elimination of threats remained in place as a reminder of what was possible when a military family was betrayed and what consequences awaited anyone who underestimated the commitment of a soldier to protecting his family. Linda Thorne remained in federal prison, serving a life sentence without possibility of parole. She had spent 10 years in solitary confinement, her requests for contact with her children rejected systematically. Her attempts to appeal her conviction had been denied repeatedly, and her efforts to generate sympathy for her situation had been met with cold indifference from a legal system that understood the severity of her crimes. Derek visited Linda's prison exactly once during the 10 years since her conviction. The visit was brief, clinical, and designed to ensure that Linda understood the permanence of her situation and the futility of any hope for redemption or forgiveness. "I want you to understand something," Derek had told her during that final visit. "Your choices didn't just destroy our marriage or hurt our children. Your choices endangered American military families and compromised national security. The consequences you're facing aren't just personal. They're the price that traitors pay for betraying their country. Your children will never know you, Derek continued. They will never visit you, never write to you, never acknowledge your existence. They understand that you chose betrayal over family, lies over truth, and foreign interests over American values. They understand that you stopped being their mother when you made those choices. You will spend the rest of your life in this prison, forgotten by everyone who ever mattered to you, remembered only as an example of what happens to people who betray military families. That is your legacy, and that is the price you chose to pay when you decided that personal pleasure was more important than loyalty and honor. Derek had walked away from that visit with complete satisfaction that justice had been served and that Linda understood the permanence of her situation. He never thought about her again, focusing instead on the future he was building with his children and the mission he had undertaken to protect military families from similar threats. The 10th anniversary of Derek's return from Operation Darkwater was marked by a ceremony at the Pentagon recognizing his contributions to military family security and national defense. Senior officials from every branch of the military, intelligence agencies, and federal law enforcement attended the ceremony to honor Derek's achievements and to recognize the permanent impact of his campaign. Colonel Thorne's response to the betrayal of his family has created a new standard for protecting military families and has fundamentally changed how we address threats to military personnel and their loved ones, said the Secretary of Defense during the ceremony. His methods have been adopted by military and intelligence organizations worldwide, and his legacy will protect military families for generations to come. Derek's acceptance speech was brief and focused on the values that had guided his campaign and that continued to guide his work protecting military families. Military families serve their country in ways that most Americans will never understand, Derek said. We deploy to dangerous places, we serve in classified operations, and we make sacrifices that put our families at risk. Those sacrifices make us vulnerable to people who would exploit our service for their own benefit. But our service also gives us unique capabilities to protect our families and to eliminate threats before they can cause damage. We have training, resources, and networks that allow us to identify betrayal, investigate threats, and eliminate dangers with systematic precision. The most important lesson my family learned is that betrayal is not a mistake. It is a choice that carries permanent consequences. People who choose to betray military families must understand that they are declaring war on people who are uniquely qualified to fight and win that war. My campaign to protect my family became a mission to protect all military families. That mission will continue as long as there are threats to military families, and as long as there are people who underestimate our commitment to protecting what we hold most dear. As Derek concluded his speech, he looked out at an audience that included his children, military leaders, intelligence officials, and hundreds of military families who had been protected by the protocols and procedures that his campaign had created. These families understood that Derek's victory was their victory, that his protection was their protection, and that his legacy would shield their children from the kinds of threats that had once seemed inevitable. The ceremony concluded with the presentation of a new medal, the Thorne Family Protection Medal, which would be awarded annually to military personnel who demonstrated exceptional commitment to protecting military families from threats both foreign and domestic. Derek was the first recipient of the medal that bore his name, but he understood that many others would follow in his footsteps, carrying forward the mission he had begun. That evening, Derek returned to his home, where his children were waiting to celebrate the anniversary and to reflect on everything their family had accomplished together. The house was filled with friends and colleagues who had supported Derek's mission and who understood the significance of what had been achieved. Michael raised a toast to his father, speaking words that reflected the values Derek had instilled in him and the lessons he had learned from their family's experience. 10 years ago, our family faced betrayal that was designed to destroy everything we held sacred, Michael said. But Dad taught us that betrayal is not the end of the story. It's the beginning of a new chapter where we demonstrate what we're truly capable of when we're fighting for what matters most. Dad showed us that loyalty isn't just a word. It's a commitment that requires action, sacrifice, and the willingness to pay whatever price is necessary to protect the people we love. He showed us that some battles are worth fighting regardless of the cost, and that some victories are permanent. Emma added her own words. reflecting on the impact their father's campaign had made on their lives and on military families everywhere. Dad didn't just protect our family. He created a new standard for what it means to be loyal to military families, Emma said. He showed us that military families have unique vulnerabilities, but we also have unique strengths. We have the training, the resources, and the commitment to protect ourselves and each other in ways that most people cannot understand. The most important thing Dad taught us is that forgiveness isn't always appropriate, and that some betrayals carry consequences that should last forever. People who choose to betray military families need to understand that they're not just hurting individual families. They're attacking the foundation of military service and national defense. Derek looked at his children with pride and satisfaction. They had not only survived the betrayal that had threatened to destroy their family, they had emerged stronger, wiser, and more committed to the values that had guided Derek's campaign. They understood that protecting military families was not just a personal responsibility. It was a national security imperative that required constant vigilance and systematic preparation. As the evening concluded and the guests departed, Derek stood alone in his study looking at the files and documents that had guided his campaign 10 years earlier. The systematic destruction of Linda's betrayal network was complete, but Derek's mission to protect military families was ongoing and would continue for the rest of his life. The photographs on Derek's desk showed his children at various stages of their lives, as confused teenagers trying to understand their father's absence, as young adults learning the truth about their mother's betrayal, and as accomplished professionals carrying forward the values their father had taught them. Each photograph represented a victory in Derek's campaign to protect his family and to ensure that betrayal would never again threaten what he held most dear. Derek opened a secure drawer and removed a document that he reviewed annually on this date, a comprehensive list of every person who had participated in the betrayal of his family and a detailed accounting of the consequences they had faced. The list was complete, the consequences were permanent, and the message was clear. Betraying a military family carried a price that would be paid in full, regardless of how long it took or what methods were required. Linda Thorne, life in federal prison without possibility of parole. No contact with children. No possibility of redemption. Gregory Hoffman, executed for treason. Spy network completely dismantled. Legacy destroyed permanently. Rebecca Stone, disbarred, imprisoned, reputation destroyed. Career and credibility eliminated. Margaret Henley, marriage destroyed, reputation ruined, social standing eliminated. Isolated and abandoned. The list continued for pages, documenting the systematic elimination of every threat to Derek's family and the permanent consequences that had been imposed on everyone who had chosen betrayal over loyalty. Each entry represented a victory in Derek's campaign and a deterrent to anyone who might consider targeting military families in the future. Derek closed the file and locked it away, understanding that his work was complete, but that his vigilance was eternal. The threats to military families would continue to evolve, but the principles that had guided his campaign would remain constant. Loyalty is non-negotiable. Betrayal carries permanent consequences, and protecting military families requires whatever methods are necessary to eliminate threats completely. As Derek prepared for bed, he reflected on the legacy he had created and the future he had secured for his children and for military families everywhere. His campaign had begun as personal revenge against specific individuals who had betrayed his family. It had evolved into a systematic transformation of how military families were protected and how threats against them were addressed. The man who had returned from classified operations to find his family destroyed by betrayal had rebuilt his life, protected his children, and created a legacy that would endure for generations. Derek Thorne had proven that some men never forgive, never forget, and never stop fighting for what they believe in. His war was over, but his victory was eternal. Military families would be safer because of what he had accomplished. The Thorne Standard would protect military children who weren't even born yet. The consequences of betraying a military family would be understood and feared by anyone who might consider targeting soldiers and their loved ones. Derek's final thought before sleep was a prayer of gratitude, not for the destruction of his enemies, but for the protection of his family and the preservation of the values that made military service possible. He had fought the good fight, he had kept the faith, and he had finished the course that duty and honor had set before him. The next morning would bring new challenges and new threats to military families, but Derek was ready to face them with the same systematic precision and unwavering commitment that had guided his campaign against Linda's betrayal. His children would carry forward his mission, his protocols would protect future generations, and his legacy would ensure that no military family would ever again face the kind of systematic betrayal that had once threatened to destroy everything he held sacred. Derek Thorne had won his war completely and permanently. His victory would protect military families forever, and his legend would serve as an eternal warning to anyone who underestimated the commitment of a soldier to protecting his family. The price of betraying a military family had been established, documented, and made permanent. That price would be paid by anyone foolish enough to test Derek's legacy or to threaten the military families who lived under his protection. Some men forgive, some men forget. Derek Thorne was not one of those men, and military families were safer because of his refusal to accept betrayal without permanent consequences. His war was over. His victory was eternal. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. What Once Was Solid. Devin Lowry stared at the computer screen, his face illuminated by the harsh glow as security footage played before him. The timestamp read 2:17 a.m., 3 days ago while he'd been in Seattle securing a new contract for his security consulting firm. On screen, his wife Bethany giggled as a tall man with styled dark hair pinned her against the kitchen island. Their kitchen island, where Devin made Saturday morning pancakes with his son Liam. Devin hadn't always been a man who anticipated betrayal. 7 years in military intelligence had taught him to look for patterns, to notice discrepancies, but he'd fought against applying those skills at home. Until Liam had innocently mentioned, "Mom's friend with the tattoos comes over when you're away on trips." The signs had accumulated over 3 months. New passwords on Bethany's phone, cash withdrawals without explanations, the lingering scent of unfamiliar cologne in their bedroom, hushed phone conversations that ended when he entered rooms. Still, he'd wanted to believe there was another explanation. Bethany had been good to him and 8-year-old Liam after they'd lost Liam's biological mother to cancer 4 years ago. The first 2 years of their marriage had seemed perfect. Devin's fingers hovered over the keyboard. More footage waited. Security cameras capturing every room in their expansive North Side home, installed after a break-in attempt last year. He didn't need to see more. Didn't want to. But as he reached to close the laptop, voices from the footage caught his attention. What about the kid? The man, Devin recognized him as Trent Montgomery, Bethany's so-called fitness instructor, was asking. Bethany's laugh was dismissive. Liam? He's Devin's problem. Once we're together, he'll have to figure out full custody. I never signed up to be a mom, especially to someone else's kid. You don't love him at all? Trent sounded surprised. He's a reminder of Devin's past, of his perfect first wife who died so tragically. Bethany's voice turned mocking. St. Catherine who rescued shelter animals and taught underprivileged kids. I'm tired of competing with a ghost and her offspring. The cold calculation in her voice froze Devin's blood. He'd believed she loved Liam. She'd certainly pretended well enough. The birthday parties she'd organized, the school events she'd attended, the bedtime stories she'd read. All a performance. Devin closed the laptop and stood, his mind racing but oddly clear. Military training had taught him to compartmentalize, to think strategically even when emotions threatened to overwhelm. He wouldn't confront her yet. Not until he had a plan. He picked up his phone and dialed his oldest friend, Parker Donovan. After Devin had saved Parker's life during an intelligence operation gone wrong in Kandahar, their bond had become unbreakable. Now Parker ran the legal department at Devin's security firm, Sentinel Solutions. "Park, I need your help," Devin said when his friend answered. "And I need you to be the cold-blooded bastard I know you can be." "That bad?" Parker asked, instantly serious. "Worse. Bethany's been cheating, and she's made it clear she wants nothing to do with Liam." There was a long pause. "The prenup is solid. We made sure of that. But timing matters for maximum protection. Don't confront her yet." "Not planning to. I need a few days to get things in order." "Smart. Come to the office tomorrow. We'll activate the contingency protocol." The contingency protocol. Something they'd established years ago after Devin had helped too many wealthy clients lose everything in ugly divorces. A systematic approach to protecting assets, documenting evidence, and preparing for worst-case scenarios. Devin had never imagined using it himself. "One more thing," Devin said. "I need background on Trent Montgomery." "Deep background. The fitness guy? Consider it done." Parker's tone was grim. "Devin, don't do anything stupid." "I won't," Devin promised. "But I won't do nothing either." After hanging up, Devin checked the time, nearly midnight. He walked quietly to Liam's room, pushing the door open gently. His son slept peacefully, dark hair falling across his forehead, one arm wrapped around the stuffed wolf Catherine had given him before she died. Devin felt a surge of protective rage. Bethany might have fooled him, but he'd never let her hurt Liam. Devin returned to the guest room where he'd been sleeping since his return, claiming a work deadline to avoid sharing a bed with Bethany. He lay awake, constructing the foundation of a plan that would ensure his son's safety and make Bethany regret her betrayal. By morning, Devin knew exactly what he needed to do. Chapter 2: Gathering Clouds. Bethany's behavior had grown increasingly suspicious over the past month. She'd claimed Trent Montgomery was helping her train for a charity 5K, but their sessions had mysteriously expanded from twice weekly to nearly daily, often running late into the evening. Credit card statements showed charges at upscale restaurants on nights she claimed to be at the gym, and her new wardrobe seemed excessive even for Bethany's expensive tastes. As Devin sat in Parker's office the next morning, his friend slid a folder across the desk. Trent Montgomery, 34, former model turned personal trainer, specializes in private fitness instruction for wealthy women. Parker's voice was clinical. "He's a pattern predator, Devin. There have been 3 divorces in the last 5 years where he was named as the correspondent. He targets married women with assets, bleeds them dry, then moves on." Devin flipped through the file, studying the man who had invaded his home and marriage. "He doesn't know who he's dealing with." "That's what concerns me," Parker said. "You've got that look." "What look?" "The one you had in Kandahar before you dismantled that warlord's entire operation single-handedly." Devin's mouth tightened. "This isn't Kandahar." "Exactly. This is civilian life with civilian rules. I've got 3 associates working on securing your finances. The prenup is ironclad. Bethany's repeated infidelity triggers the clause that limits her to her premarital assets only. No alimony, no property division beyond personal items she brought to the marriage." "Good. What about Liam?" "You've been his legal father since the adoption went through last year. Bethany has no biological connection and has only been his stepmother for 3 years. Given the evidence of her disinterest and inappropriate behavior, bringing strange men into the home while caring for a minor, we'll file for emergency temporary custody while the divorce proceeds." Devin nodded, relieved. "And the house? Purchased before the marriage with your funds. We've documented all improvements made with your separate property. It's secure." Parker leaned forward. "The question is, how do you want to play this? Fast and brutal, or strategic long game?" Devin thought of Bethany's dismissive words about Liam. "Strategic, but with a definitive end. I want her to understand exactly what she's losing and why." Over the next 3 days, Devin worked methodically. He transferred funds to secure accounts, documented household assets, and gathered comprehensive evidence of Bethany's infidelity. He found an apartment in a secure building owned by a former military colleague and quietly moved essential items for himself and Liam when Bethany was out with Trent. He scheduled meetings with Liam's school to explain the impending changes, arranged for a child therapist specializing in parental separation, and prepared age-appropriate explanations for his son. Through it all, he maintained a calm facade at home, even as Bethany grew increasingly careless with her deception. On the 4th day, everything was in place. Devin picked Liam up from school instead of the usual sitter. "We're going on an adventure, buddy," he told his son. "Remember how we talked about different types of homes people live in?" Liam nodded solemnly. They'd read books about families and different living arrangements, part of Devin's careful preparation. "Well, I found us a cool apartment with a rooftop where we can stargaze. We're going to stay there for a while." "Is Bethany coming too?" Liam asked, his voice small. Devin chose his words carefully. "No, buddy. Bethany and I have decided to live apart. Remember how we talked about how sometimes grown-ups need different things to be happy? Like when Kyle's parents got divorced and he got 2 bedrooms? Similar to that, yes." Devin felt a wave of gratitude for his son's resilience. "Is it because she doesn't like me?" Liam's question was so quietly devastating that Devin had to pull the car over. He turned to face his son. Liam, listen to me. None of this is because of you. Bethany and I made grown-up mistakes and decisions, but you are perfect exactly as you are. The problem is with us, not you. Do you understand? Liam nodded, but Devin could see uncertainty in his eyes. I promise you, Devin continued, that you and I are a team forever. Nothing will change that. After settling Liam at the apartment with Parker's wife Michelle, who had agreed to stay with him for the evening, Devin returned to the house for the final confrontation. He arrived just as Bethany was dressing to go out, wearing a new dress he didn't recognize. You're home early, she said, surprise evident in her voice. I was just heading out to meet the girls for drinks. The girls? Devin leaned against the doorframe. Or Trent Montgomery? Bethany froze, her lipstick halfway to her mouth. What are you talking about? Without a word, Devin opened his laptop and played selected clips from the security footage. Bethany and Trent in the kitchen, in the living room, in their bedroom. Her face drained of color as her own voice filled the room. Liam? He's Devin's problem. I never signed up to be a mom, especially to someone else's kid. When he finally stopped the footage, Bethany had composed herself, her shock replaced by calculation. You've been spying on me? That's an invasion of privacy. Her attempt at outrage fell flat. It's my security system in my house, Devin replied calmly. Invaded by a man you brought into our home while I was working to support this family. This marriage hasn't been working for a long time, Bethany said, switching tactics. You're always working, always focused on Liam. Trent makes me feel special. Special enough to dismiss my son as an inconvenience? To mock his dead mother? Bethany at least had the grace to look uncomfortable. You never gave me a chance to be a real part of your life. You and Liam were always a package deal, with your memories of perfect Catherine hovering over everything. And yet you knew that when you married me, you promised to love him as your own. Devin's phone buzzed, a text from his client Harrison Technical about an emergency security breach. He silenced it, but it immediately buzzed again. I need to take this, he said, stepping into the hall. The client's chief security officer sounded panicked. Their proprietary software had been compromised, and they needed Devin immediately. When he returned to the bedroom, Bethany was rearranging her makeup as if their marriage hadn't just imploded. I have an emergency at Harrison Technical. Their main server's been breached, and I need to go in personally. He hesitated. Liam's sitter has a family emergency. I need you to watch him for a few hours. Bethany laughed, short and sharp. Tonight? I've had these plans for weeks. Your plans to cheat on me are less important than my professional obligations, Devin said flatly. I couldn't watch your stepkid, Bethany said, emphasizing the word "your" with ugly precision. I have plans with Trent. Besides, you're so concerned about what kind of mother I am. Why would you want me watching him? The callousness stunned Devin despite everything he'd seen and heard. In that moment, he realized that Bethany had never cared for Liam, or him, at all. They had been props in her comfortable life, nothing more. You're right, he said quietly. He deserves better. We both do. Devin texted Michelle, who agreed to keep Liam overnight. Then he drove to Harrison Technical, his son's devastating question echoing in his mind. Is it because she doesn't like me? By the time he resolved the security breach at 3 a.m., Devin's strategic plan had evolved into something more definitive. Bethany had shown her true colors, and he would ensure she faced the full consequences of her choices. Chapter 3. The Storm Breaks. Bethany's platinum credit card was declined at Valeni's boutique, causing a scene that drew stares from other shoppers. Her face flushed with embarrassment as she fumbled for another card from her designer purse. I'm so sorry, she told the saleswoman. There must be some mistake. Try this one. The second card was declined as well. As panic set in, her phone chimed with a text message from Devin. You're on your own now. I've canceled all joint accounts and credit cards. Your personal card still works, if you haven't maxed it out already. Rage replaced embarrassment as Bethany stormed out of the store, already calling Trent. When he didn't answer, she tried her mother, Vivian Abbott, the wealthy widow of a pharmaceutical executive. Mother, it's an emergency, Bethany said when Vivian answered. Devin's gone insane. He's cut off all my cards, taken Liam, and moved out. What did you do? Vivian's voice was sharp with suspicion. Why do you assume I did something? Bethany demanded, sliding into her Mercedes, At least she still had that. Because Devin Lowry is the most level-headed man I've ever met. He wouldn't do this without cause. Vivian paused. Is this about that trainer you're always with? Bethany's silence was answer enough. Vivian sighed heavily. Come to the house. We'll sort this out. But sorting it out proved impossible. When Bethany arrived at her childhood home, she found her mother had already spoken with Devin. He sent me the security footage, Vivian said coldly. How could you bring that man into your home? Into the bed you share with your husband? And the things you said about Liam? She shook her head in disgust. You're taking his side? Bethany was incredulous. There are no sides in self-destruction, Bethany. You've made your choice. Now you'll have to live with the consequences. Those consequences became clearer when Bethany returned home to find the security code changed. Her key still worked, but inside, she discovered subtle differences. Devin's office was locked. Liam's room was empty of personal items. The master closet held only her clothes. On the kitchen counter sat a manila envelope with her name written in Devin's precise handwriting. Inside were divorce papers citing irreconcilable differences and adultery, along with a copy of their prenuptial agreement with relevant sections highlighted. In the event of infidelity by either party, proven by clear and convincing evidence, the unfaithful spouse forfeits all rights to marital property, businesses, investments, and support beyond their separate property owned prior to marriage. Attached was a financial summary showing exactly what that meant. Bethany would keep her trust fund income, personal jewelry, and the Mercedes. Everything else, the house, vacation property, investment accounts, and all marital assets, remained with Devin. Bethany called the most aggressive divorce attorney in the city, Roland Pierce, known for extracting massive settlements regardless of prenups. His receptionist scheduled a consultation for the following morning. That night, Trent finally returned her calls. Baby, calm down, he said soothingly. So he found out. It was bound to happen eventually. Now we can be together openly. He's cut me off completely, Trent. The prenup is airtight. I get nothing from the marriage. Nothing? What about the house? The investments? The naked calculation in his voice should have warned her, but Bethany was too distraught to notice. All his. I signed the stupid prenup thinking it would never matter. What about your trust fund? Trent asked after a telling pause. That's mine, but it's only $15,000 a month. Hardly enough for the lifestyle we talked about. Another pause. We'll figure something out, baby. Roland Pierce is good. He'll find a way to break the prenup. But Roland Pierce, after reviewing the document and evidence the next morning, was blunt. This prenup was drafted by Parker Donovan, one of the best contract attorneys in the state. The infidelity clause is valid, and the evidence is overwhelming. He closed the folder. Quite frankly, Mrs. Lowry, you don't have a case. There must be something, Bethany insisted. What if I claim emotional abandonment? Devin works constantly. He's always traveling. Did you seek marriage counseling? Document your concerns? Request he reduce his schedule? No, but, Mrs. Lowry, this prenup has been tested in court before. Parker Donovan doesn't make mistakes. Roland leaned forward. Your best option is to negotiate for whatever small concessions Mr. Lowry might offer out of goodwill. Goodwill? Bethany laughed bitterly. He texted me that I'm on my own while canceling every payment from our joint accounts. There is no goodwill. Then you need to adjust your expectations. Roland named his consultation fee, which consumed nearly half the cash Bethany had on hand. Over the following week, Bethany's situation deteriorated further. Trent became increasingly distant as he realized the wealth he'd anticipated accessing had evaporated. She discovered her gym membership canceled when her key card was rejected at the front desk. The housekeeper stopped coming. The landscapers informed her they'd been hired directly by Devin for the remainder of the month, after which she would need to make new arrangements. When she went to withdraw funds from what she thought was her personal account, she learned it had been a joint account all along, now frozen pending divorce proceedings. Her separate account held only enough for 2 months' expenses at her normal spending rate. Desperate, Bethany called Devin repeatedly until he finally answered. This is cruel, Devin, she said without preamble. You can't just cut me off like this. I haven't cut you off from anything that's legally yours, he replied, his voice even. Your trust fund remains accessible. Your personal accounts are untouched. The prenuptial agreement you willingly signed specifies exactly what happens in case of infidelity. I made a mistake, she tried, softening her voice. We could try counseling. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary, Bethany. You carried on an affair for months, brought your lover into our home, and made it abundantly clear you never cared for my son. His tone remained calm, which somehow made it worse. There's nothing to salvage. At least let me talk to Liam, she pleaded. He must be confused. Liam is with a therapist who specializes in children dealing with parental separation. When she feels it's appropriate, supervised visits may be arranged. Supervised? I'm his mother. Stepmother, Devin corrected, who, by her own recorded admission, never wanted the role. The courts tend to prioritize stability and emotional safety for children. Your boyfriend, your financial instability, and your demonstrated disinterest in Liam's welfare make you an unsuitable influence at present. Bethany's temper flared. You cold-hearted bastard. You planned all this. No, Bethany. You did. Devin's voice finally showed a hint of emotion, a controlled anger that chilled her. Every choice was yours. Every consequence follows naturally. You prioritized your desires over your commitments. Now you're experiencing life without the safety net my income provided. I'll fight you, she threatened. I'll take everything. You're welcome to try, Devin said simply, and ended the call. Trent, when he finally agreed to meet her, was no more sympathetic. I thought we were building something together, Bethany said, fighting tears across the table at a mid-range restaurant. All she could afford now. We were, Trent replied, checking his watch. But I can't sustain both of us on what I make. You said you had resources. I have my trust fund. $15,000 a month barely covers a decent lifestyle for one person in this city, let alone two. He hesitated. Look, maybe we need to take a break while you sort out your divorce. Get whatever settlement you can. There won't be a settlement, Bethany said bitterly. That's what I've been trying to tell you. Trent's expression hardened. Then I don't see a future for us, Bethany. I need a partner, not a dependent. As he walked out of the restaurant, leaving her with the check she could barely afford, Bethany finally understood what Devin had known from the beginning. Trent had never wanted her, only what she could provide. And now that the provision had ended, so had his interest. That night, alone in the empty house that would soon no longer be hers, Bethany realized the extent of her miscalculation. She'd gambled her secure, comfortable life on a fantasy and lost everything that mattered. Worse, she couldn't even claim it had been worth it for love. Because Trent, like her, had only ever loved what others could provide. Chapter 4, Desperate Measures. 2 months after Devin's departure, Bethany's financial situation had become dire. Her trust fund covered basic expenses, but her lifestyle had always depended on Devin's much larger income. The divorce proceedings moved inexorably forward, with each filing confirming the prenup's validity. Trent had completely disappeared from her life, ghosting her after their last conversation. Through mutual acquaintances, Bethany learned he'd already moved on to another wealthy married woman, a pattern Devin had discovered immediately, but she had been too infatuated to see. The house, while still legally in limbo, would clearly go to Devin in the final settlement. Without funds for proper maintenance, the property was beginning to show signs of neglect. The pool had turned green, the landscaping was overgrown, and minor repairs remained unfixed. Late one night, after too many glasses of wine, Bethany stumbled across the realization that had been lurking in her subconscious for weeks. Devin's home office might contain financial information she could leverage. Despite his technological security measures, he still kept physical backups and documents, a habit from his military days when he distrusted purely digital storage. She called the one person who might help her, Lloyd Chambers, a former boyfriend who now worked as a locksmith. 3 hours and $500 later, nearly draining her remaining cash, Lloyd had opened Devin's office door. I don't want to know what you're looking for, he said, pocketing her money. But whatever it is, be careful. Your ex strikes me as the thorough type. After he left, Bethany systematically searched the office. Most file cabinets were empty. Devin had clearly removed important documents. But behind a false panel she'd accidentally discovered during cleaning years ago, she found what appeared to be an external hard drive and several USB drives labeled with client names. One caught her attention. Harrison Technical, the client whose emergency had precipitated their final confrontation. The company had been in the news recently for a revolutionary security protocol they developed, worth billions in potential licensing. Moving to Devin's computer, Bethany found it locked. But she knew his pattern for passwords, combinations of military operational names, and dates meaningful to him. After several attempts, she was in. The Harrison Technical USB contained what looked like proprietary code and internal security assessments. Bethany wasn't technical enough to understand the details, but she recognized potential leverage when she saw it. If Devin had improperly retained client proprietary information, it could damage his reputation and business, enough to force a more favorable divorce settlement. She copied everything to her laptop, carefully returned the originals, and relocked the office door. Her hands shook with adrenaline and possibilities. The next morning, fighting a hangover, Bethany called a college friend who worked in tech. "Aaron, I need your expertise on something sensitive," she said after exchanging pleasantries. "I have some files that might be valuable, but I need to understand what I'm looking at." Aaron agreed to meet that afternoon. After reviewing the files at a coffee shop, his expression grew increasingly troubled. "Beth, where did you get these?" he asked, lowering his voice. "This is internal security architecture for Harrison Technical's new encryption protocol. It's worth millions, and possession of it without authorization is a federal offense." "It's complicated," Bethany hedged. "Could someone use this information improperly?" "Absolutely. Corporate espionage, competitive advantage, security breaches. This is serious stuff." Aaron closed the laptop. "I don't want to know more, but whatever you're thinking, stop. This could lead to criminal charges." Despite Aaron's warning, Bethany's desperation outweighed her caution. She drafted an email to Devin suggesting they renegotiate their divorce terms, hinting at the information she'd discovered. She didn't explicitly threaten exposure, but the implication was clear. What Bethany didn't know was that Devin had anticipated this move. His supposedly secure computer had been a honeypot, a trap designed to track and document unauthorized access. Every file she'd viewed and copied had been tagged with invisible digital markers. The confidential information was actually elaborate fabrication, convincing but ultimately worthless and non-proprietary. When Devin received her thinly veiled threat, he was prepared. Rather than responding directly, he forwarded the email to Parker and initiated the next phase of his response strategy. The following day, Bethany received a cease and desist letter from Harrison Technical's legal department, citing unauthorized access to falsified company information. The letter detailed exactly which files she had accessed and when, down to the minute. "The materials you obtained," the letter stated, "were security test files created specifically to identify unauthorized access and potential corporate espionage. They contain no actual proprietary information, but do include unique digital markers that have identified you as the unauthorized user." Harrison Technical has been advised that this was part of an attempted blackmail scheme. The letter concluded with an offer: sign an NDA admitting the attempted access but requiring no further legal action, or face prosecution for computer fraud and attempted extortion. Panicked, Bethany called Aaron, who refused to speak with her. She tried Roland Pierce, who also declined to become involved in what he termed a potential criminal matter outside my area of practice. With nowhere else to turn, Bethany finally called her mother. "I've made a terrible mistake," she admitted, breaking down in tears. Vivian listened silently to the full explanation before responding. "You broke into Devin's office, stole what you thought was confidential client information, and attempted to blackmail him with it," she summarized flatly. "Have I understood correctly?" "I was desperate," Bethany whispered. "He's taken everything." "No, Bethany. He's taken what is legally his according to an agreement you signed." Vivian's voice was cold. "You've spent your entire life believing rules don't apply to you, that there would always be someone, your father, me, Devin, to clean up your messes and fund your comfort." "Mother, please. I need help." "Yes, you do, but not the kind you're asking for." Vivian sighed heavily. "I'll pay for a criminal defense attorney if needed, but that's all. It's time you faced consequences, Bethany. Real ones." After hanging up, Bethany sat in the increasingly empty house, truly alone for perhaps the first time in her life. The realization dawned slowly but definitively. She had orchestrated her own downfall through a lifetime of selfishness and entitlement. She signed the NDA from Harrison Technical the next morning, accepting this defeat but already forming new plans. If Devin thought this would end her campaign, he had underestimated her determination. What she didn't realize was that Devin hadn't underestimated her at all. In fact, he had counted on her continued desperation to drive his larger strategy forward. Chapter 5. The Unexpected Ally. As October gave way to November, the divorce proceedings continued their methodical progress. Each hearing confirmed what had been clear from the beginning. The prenuptial agreement would be upheld, Bethany would receive no marital assets, and Devin would retain full custody of Liam. Bethany, running out of both options and money, had been forced to sell her designer clothes and jewelry to maintain even a semblance of her former lifestyle. The Mercedes had been repossessed when she'd missed 2 payments, unable to keep up with the loan from her diminished resources. Devin, meanwhile, had settled into a new rhythm with Liam. Their apartment, while smaller than the house, had become a true home. Liam's therapist reported steady progress in processing the abrupt family changes, noting that the consistency and stability Devin provided had been crucial to his adjustment. Sentinel Solutions had not only survived the turmoil in its founder's personal life, but thrived. Devin's handling of the Harrison technical security breach had led to additional high-profile contracts. Parker had stepped up to manage day-to-day operations during the worst of the divorce crisis, demonstrating leadership that led Devin to promote him to Chief Operating Officer. Life was rebuilding, piece by carefully placed piece, until one evening when Devin's security system alerted him to a visitor at the apartment, Vivian Abbott, Bethany's mother. Mrs. Abbott, Devin greeted her cautiously when he answered the door. "This is unexpected." Vivian stood ramrod straight, every inch the society matriarch despite her 70 years. "May I come in? What I have to say shouldn't be discussed in a hallway." Devin hesitated, then stepped aside. "Liam is at a playdate. We'll have privacy." Vivian entered, surveying the apartment with an appraising eye. "You've made a nice home here," she acknowledged, genuine surprise in her voice. "What can I do for you, Mrs. Abbott?" Devin remained standing, unwilling to settle into a potentially lengthy conversation. "First, I want to apologize for my daughter's behavior," Vivian said directly. Both the affair and her subsequent actions were inexcusable. Devin hadn't expected this. "Thank you. But I assume you didn't come just to apologize on Bethany's behalf." "No." Vivian placed her designer handbag on the counter and extracted a folder. "I came because Bethany is planning something dangerous, for herself and possibly for you and Liam." This caught Devin's full attention. "Explain." "Bethany has always had a talent for finding weak, easily manipulated men. After her fitness instructor abandoned her, she's found someone new. Monroe Phillips." Vivian handed Devin the folder. "He has a history of petty crime and fraud charges. 3 restraining orders from former girlfriends. And he's convinced Bethany he can help her get what she deserves from you." Devin opened the folder, scanning the documents inside. Police reports, court records, surveillance photos of Bethany with a wiry man in his 40s with nervous eyes and a too-wide smile. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked, studying Vivian's face for deception. "Because despite everything, I don't want my daughter in prison. And that's where she's heading." Vivian met his gaze steadily. "Monroe has been asking questions about Liam's schedule, about where he goes to school, what activities he's involved in." A cold knot formed in Devin's stomach. "You think they're planning to take Liam?" "I think Monroe has convinced Bethany that if she had physical custody of Liam, even temporarily and illegally, she could force you to renegotiate the divorce terms." Vivian's voice wavered slightly. "Bethany was always spoiled, entitled, selfish. But she's never been dangerous before. This man has changed her." Devin processed this information rapidly, his mind already formulating countermeasures. "Do you have evidence of these plans?" "Only conversations I've overheard. Nothing concrete." Vivian hesitated. "There's something else. Monroe has been asking about your business clients too. The timing of your meetings, which executives you work with personally." "Corporate espionage," Devin concluded. "If they can't get to me through Liam, they'll try to damage my business reputation." "Likely both." Vivian reached for her purse. "I've done what I came to do. Warned you. What happens next is your decision." "Why now?" Devin asked as she turned to leave. "You've supported Bethany through everything else. Why draw the line here?" Vivian paused at the door. "Because there are lines, Mr. Lowry. My husband and I may have indulged Bethany excessively, contributed to her worst qualities. But endangering a child, particularly a child as sweet as Liam, is beyond forgiveness." Her eyes held genuine regret. I failed as a mother in many ways. I won't compound that failure by enabling something truly unforgivable. After she left, Devin immediately called Parker and outlined what he'd learned. I had Bethany under basic surveillance, but nothing this intensive, Parker admitted. If they're planning something against Liam, we need to increase security immediately. Agreed. And I want everything on Monroe Phillips. Deep background, current associates, financial situation, known methods. On it. What about Liam's school? I'll speak with the principal tomorrow, update security protocols. No one but me or Michelle picks him up under any circumstances. Devin paused, calculating. And I think it's time we accelerated our timeline. For what? The final phase. I've been willing to let the divorce play out normally, let Bethany adjust to her new circumstances gradually. But if she's escalating to threats against Liam or my business, we need to end this definitively. The nuclear option? Parker sounded concerned. Not yet, but I'm moving the pieces into position. I want this finished before Christmas. That night, after checking on sleeping Liam repeatedly, Devin refined his strategy. Vivian's warning had been unexpected but clarified his path forward. Bethany had chosen escalation. He would respond accordingly, not with matching recklessness, but with the calculated precision that had defined his military career and business success. By morning, Devin had a comprehensive security plan for Liam and a timeline for concluding the Bethany situation permanently. If she wanted to play a dangerous game, she would discover too late that she was hopelessly outmatched. What Devin couldn't anticipate was how desperate Bethany had truly become, or how quickly her new alliance with Monroe Phillips would lead to direct confrontation. Chapter 6. Christmas Convergence. The weeks leading to Christmas brought heavy snow to the city, transforming the urban landscape into a winter wonderland that delighted Liam but complicated Devin's security measures. School had released for winter break, leaving Devin to balance work responsibilities with childcare during a season already emotionally charged for his son. Liam had been asking difficult questions about Christmas traditions and family gatherings. His therapist had warned Devin this would be a particularly vulnerable time. The first major holiday since the family's fracture would naturally highlight what had been lost. Will Bethany come for Christmas? Liam had asked over breakfast, his voice carefully neutral in the way children adopt when bracing for disappointment. No, buddy, Devin answered honestly. Bethany won't be joining us. But we're going to have a great Christmas with Uncle Parker and Aunt Michelle, and Grandma Vivian might visit too. The mention of Bethany's mother had been a calculated inclusion. Since her warning about Monroe Phillips, Vivian had maintained cautious contact, providing updates on Bethany's deteriorating situation while establishing a warmer relationship with Liam than she'd bothered with during the marriage. Devin had increased security following Vivian's warning. Liam's school had been briefed on strict pickup procedures. The apartment building's security team had photos of Bethany and Monroe with instructions to deny entry and alert Devin immediately if either appeared. Sentinel's team maintained discreet surveillance on both subjects when possible. Monroe Phillips had proven to be exactly the sort of opportunistic parasite Vivian described. Background checks revealed a pattern of targeting vulnerable women with resources, manipulating them into increasingly risky behavior before disappearing with whatever assets he could secure. His criminal history included fraud, identity theft, and one concerning charge of unlawful imprisonment that had been pleaded down to a misdemeanor. Despite these precautions, Devin's security team had lost track of both Bethany and Monroe 3 days before Christmas. Their last confirmed location had been a motel on the outskirts of the city, but they had checked out without leaving a trail. Parker had advised postponing their traditional Christmas Eve gathering given the security concerns, but Devin refused. We're not letting them disrupt Liam's Christmas, he insisted during their final pre-holiday meeting at Sentinel's offices. The apartment is secure. Your house is secure. We maintain situational awareness, but we move forward normally. And if they make a move? Parker asked. Devin's expression hardened. Then they trigger the contingency protocol, and this ends permanently. On Christmas Eve morning, Devin took Liam shopping for last-minute gifts. With security discreetly positioned throughout the mall, they moved from store to store, Liam's enthusiasm for the holiday temporarily overriding the undercurrent of tension Devin couldn't entirely hide. They returned home to prepare for the evening at Parker and Michelle's house. As Liam showered and changed, Devin received a text from an unknown number. Check your email. Subject, Christmas reconciliation. You have 30 minutes to respond or consequences begin. Devin accessed his secure email server through an encrypted connection. The message contained a video attachment showing surveillance footage of the entrance to Liam's school, Parker and Michelle's home, and Sentinel's headquarters. The message below was simple: 50% of marital assets in joint custody, or these locations become targets. Not idle threats. Proof of capability attached. The second attachment contained detailed information about the security systems at each location, information only someone with insider access would know. Devin immediately activated the emergency protocol, alerting his security team while initiating a trace on the email origin. He called Parker, who confirmed Michelle and their home were secure. The school was empty for the holiday, but Devin dispatched a team to verify its security anyway. The email trace returned results faster than expected. It had been sent from the business center of the Grand Windsor Hotel downtown. Hotel security cameras provided real-time confirmation. Bethany sat alone in the center, repeatedly checking her watch. Monroe was nowhere visible, which concerned Devin more than if they'd been together. A split operation meant multiple threats to track. Parker, I need you to bring Michelle and come to my apartment immediately. Full security detail. I'm keeping Liam here until we contain this. Devin kept his voice level despite the fury building inside him. And contact Vivian Abbott. If she's been in communication with Bethany, we need to know. Within 30 minutes, Parker and Michelle arrived with 2 Sentinel security officers. Liam, sensing the tension but unaware of its cause, was confused by the sudden change in Christmas Eve plans. We're having a special celebration here instead, Michelle explained, producing wrapped packages from her bag with forced cheer. I brought everything we need for cookies and hot chocolate. As Michelle distracted Liam in the kitchen, Devin, Parker, and the security team assessed the situation in Devin's home office. The information in that email came from our internal systems, Parker confirmed grimly. Someone breached our security protocols. Not someone. Eleanor Hayes. Devin pulled up the personnel file of Sentinel's recently hired administrative assistant. Background check was clean, references solid. But facial recognition just matched her entering the Grand Windsor Hotel 10 minutes after Bethany left the business center. She's been working for them? Passing inside information. Parker looked shocked. For how long? At least 3 weeks, based on the access logs to the systems containing the compromised information. Devin's voice was cold. They've been planning this longer than we realized. What's our play? Parker asked. We contain and isolate the threats. Team 1 maintains position here with Liam. Team 2 apprehends Hayes for questioning. I deal with Bethany personally. Devin checked his watch. And we locate Monroe Phillips immediately. He's the most volatile element. You can't confront Bethany alone, Parker objected. Not with Monroe unaccounted for. I'm not confronting her. I'm activating our final countermeasure. Devin pulled out his phone and made a call. Agent Westfield, it's time. The Grand Windsor Hotel, room 712. Subject is likely armed and has made credible threats. All evidence has been transmitted to your secure server. After ending the call, Devin turned to Parker. FBI Cybercrime Division has been building a case against Monroe Phillips for months. I've been feeding them information through back channels since Vivian's warning. The threats against a child and business cross state lines, triggering federal jurisdiction. Parker stared at his friend. You've been working with the FBI this entire time? Without telling me. Compartmentalized information. Protection for you and the company if anything went sideways. Devin checked the security feeds on his tablet. Hayes has been apprehended entering her apartment. Monroe's location is still unknown. A hard knock at the apartment doors silenced their discussion. Security Team 1 moved immediately into defensive positions. One officer escorting Liam and Michelle to the panic room disguised as a storage closet. Devin checked the security camera and tensed. It's Vivian Abbott. Is she alone? Parker asked, hand moving to the concealed weapon beneath his jacket. Appears to be. Devin nodded to the security officer, who positioned himself to intervene if necessary while Devin opened the door. Vivian stood in the hallway, snow dusting her expensive coat, her face pale with strain. He has her, she said without preamble. Monroe double-crossed Bethany. He's holding her at the lake house and demanding ransom from me. Devin pulled her inside, closing the door. When? He called an hour ago. said their plan had changed. Instead of targeting you, they were going to extract payment from me instead. Vivian's composure cracked slightly. He sent a video. She's tied up, injured. He wants $5 million by midnight or he'll. She couldn't finish the sentence. This changes everything, Parker said. If Monroe has turned on Bethany, she's a victim now. Or it's another manipulation, Devin countered, studying Vivian's face. Did you speak directly to Bethany in this video? No. She appeared unconscious. There was blood. Vivian pulled out her phone with shaking hands. See for yourself. The video showed Bethany bound to a chair in what appeared to be the Abbott family lake house 30 miles outside the city. Her face was bruised, a cut visible on her forehead. Monroe's voice narrated calmly, $5 million by midnight, Mrs. Abbott, or your daughter won't see Christmas morning. No police, or the price becomes permanent. Devin analyzed the footage with practiced eyes. This is the southeast corner of your lake house? The one with the stone fireplace? Yes. Vivian looked surprised at his familiarity. I handled security upgrades there last year, at Bethany's request. Devin turned to Parker. Call Agent Westfield. Redirect to these coordinates. Then coordinate with local sheriff's department for backup. You're involving the police? Monroe said. Monroe is going to prison regardless, Mrs. Abbott. The only question is how many charges he'll face. Devin accessed the lake house security system through his tablet. The system is partially disabled, but exterior cameras are still online. The footage showed Monroe's car in the driveway and movement inside the house. Mrs. Abbott, I need you to contact Monroe. Tell him you've arranged the money, but need proof of life first. You want to speak directly to Bethany. And then what? Vivian asked, her aristocratic composure reasserting itself. Then we wait for law enforcement to position, and this nightmare ends tonight. The next 2 hours passed in tense coordination. The FBI team deployed to the lake house, positioning discreetly while Vivian maintained intermittent contact with Monroe, convincing him she was gathering the ransom funds. Bethany, when finally put on the phone, sounded disoriented but alive. Mother? He's lost his mind. He said I wasn't worth enough to Devin, but you'd pay anything for me. Just stay calm, darling, Vivian soothed. Everything will be resolved soon. At 11:37 p.m. on Christmas Eve, FBI agents stormed the lake house, apprehending Monroe without casualties. Bethany was transported to the hospital with minor injuries. The blood had been mostly theatrical, designed to heighten Vivian's panic and loosen her purse strings. When the call came confirming the operation's success, Devin felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief that the threat was neutralized, satisfaction that Monroe faced serious federal charges, but also an unexpected twinge of sympathy for Bethany, whose poor choices had led her from a life of privilege to victimization by the very man she trusted to help her. What happens now? Vivian asked quietly as the tension in the apartment dissipated. Monroe goes to prison for extortion, cybercrime, and assault at minimum, Devin replied. Bethany will need to cooperate with the prosecution, which means admitting her role in the earlier threats and corporate espionage attempt. And the divorce? Proceeds as planned. The criminal charges don't change the terms of our separation. Devin's tone softened slightly. But I won't press additional charges against Bethany if she accepts the divorce terms without further contest. She's paid enough for her mistakes. Vivian nodded slowly. You're a better man than she deserved, Mr. Lowry. As Christmas Eve ticked over to Christmas Day, Devin released Liam and Michelle from the panic room, explaining only that there had been a security concern that was now resolved. They continued their modest celebration, opening a few gifts early and maintaining holiday traditions despite the evening's chaos. Later, with Liam finally asleep and their guests departed, Devin stood at the apartment window watching snow fall over the city. His phone buzzed with a text from the hospital where Bethany was being treated. I understand now. I'm sorry. For everything. Especially what I said about Liam. I'll sign whatever you want. Just let me get through this with some dignity. Devin considered his response carefully before typing. The papers are with your mother. Sign them, cooperate with the FBI, and we all move forward. Liam deserves peace. He added, after a moment's reflection. Despite everything, I hope you find your way to a better life, Bethany. Just not with us. As he set the phone down, Devin realized the anger that had driven him for months had largely dissipated. In its place was something quieter, the certainty that he and Liam would be okay, that the worst was behind them, and that the new year would bring healing instead of more conflict. The storm had passed. The damage was done, but they had weathered it and emerged stronger for the experience. Chapter 7. New Foundations. Spring brought renewal to the city, fresh green replacing winter's stark palette. For months had passed since the Christmas confrontation. Monroe Phillips had accepted a plea deal, receiving 12 years in federal prison for extortion, cybercrime, assault, and related charges. Eleanor Hayes, Sentinel's compromised employee, received probation in exchange for full cooperation with the prosecution. Bethany had faced her own legal consequences, accepting a plea agreement that included 2 years probation, community service, and mandatory therapy. Following her hospital release, she had moved temporarily into her mother's home before relocating to Arizona, where Vivian's sister offered both distance from the scandal and a fresh start. The divorce had been finalized in February, with Bethany signing the agreement without contest. As promised, Devin hadn't pressed additional charges, allowing her to maintain her personal assets and dignity while surrendering all claims to marital property. For Devin and Liam, life had achieved a new equilibrium. They'd moved back into the family home after security upgrades and a thorough renovation that erased the physical reminders of betrayal. Liam had resumed his previous routine with the stability of familiar surroundings, though Devin noted his son's increased maturity, a bittersweet byproduct of difficult experiences. Sentinel Solutions had emerged stronger from the crisis. The security breach by Eleanor Hayes had prompted comprehensive protocol revisions that Devin now marketed as an enhanced service to clients. Parker's leadership during Devin's personal turmoil had earned him an official promotion to partner, solidifying their business relationship. On a warm April afternoon, Devin sat in his home office reviewing quarterly projections when the doorbell rang. Security cameras showed a delivery courier with a certified package requiring signature. The envelope contained documents from Vivian Abbott's attorney establishing a modest trust fund for Liam's education. The accompanying note was brief but clear. My grandson deserves every advantage. This is separate from Bethany and represents my commitment to his future. No strings attached. Vivian. Devin studied the documents carefully. The trust was indeed cleanly structured, with Devin as sole trustee until Liam reached majority. There were no hidden conditions or mechanisms for Bethany to access the funds. It appeared to be exactly what it claimed, a grandmother's provision for her grandson's future. After consulting with his own attorney, Devin accepted the trust on Liam's behalf. Despite his complicated history with the Abbott family, he recognized the value in maintaining positive connections to Liam's extended family, provided they respected appropriate boundaries. Those boundaries were tested the following week when Devin received an email from Bethany. My therapist suggests writing to you as part of my recovery process. I don't expect a response. I just need to acknowledge the harm I caused. I've spent months examining why I behaved as I did. The entitlement, the selfishness, the casual cruelty, especially toward Liam, who deserved none of it. There are explanations, but no excuses. I'm building a different life now, working at my aunt's gallery, living modestly, confronting my patterns rather than indulging them. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I recognize the pain I caused, and I'm trying to become someone who wouldn't cause such pain again. If someday Liam asks about me, please don't lie. Tell him I was deeply flawed but eventually recognized it. If he ever wants contact when he's older, I would welcome it on whatever terms protect his well-being. Be happy, Devin. You deserve it. Bethany. Devin sat with the email for several days before crafting a brief, neutral response acknowledging her message and wishing her well in her recovery. He didn't commit to future contact, but left the possibility open, contingent on Liam's wishes when he was mature enough to make such decisions. This exchange marked a quiet coda to their turbulent relationship. Not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement that they had both survived and could now follow separate paths without further conflict. The true test of this new equilibrium came unexpectedly through Devin's professional life. Harrison Technical, whose security crisis had coincided with his marriage's implosion, approached Sentinel with an unprecedented opportunity. They wanted to acquire the company, retaining Devin and Parker in leadership roles while providing resources to expand operations nationally. The offer was substantial, enough to secure Liam's future and elevate Sentinel from successful regional firm to industry leader. But it would require Devin to relinquish full control of the company he'd built and potentially increase his travel obligations at a time when Liam's stability remained his priority. "What are you thinking?" Parker asked after their initial meeting with Harrison's executives. They sat in Devin's office, reviewing the preliminary terms. "I'm thinking about balance," Devin replied. "This opportunity solves our financial and operational challenges, but at what cost to my time with Liam? The terms include reasonable travel restrictions and family considerations," Parker pointed out. "They understand your situation. Understanding and accommodating are different things when quarterly projections are involved." Devin leaned back in his chair. "This past year has clarified my priorities. Liam comes first, always. Any arrangement has to support that reality." "Then let's counter with specific terms that protect your role as a father," Parker suggested. "Harrison wants our expertise badly enough to accommodate reasonable boundaries." Over the following weeks, Devin negotiated modified terms that preserved his authority in key areas while establishing clear limits on travel requirements and after-hours obligations. The resulting agreement provided financial security without compromising his commitment to Liam. The acquisition process coincided with another significant development. Through a mutual client, Devin met Dr. Rebecca Torres, a child psychologist specializing in family trauma who consulted on corporate security involving minors. Their initial professional collaboration revealed shared values and compatible perspectives on balancing career demands with family priorities. Unlike his whirlwind courtship with Bethany, Devin's connection with Rebecca developed deliberately, with conscious attention to potential impacts on Liam. They worked together professionally for months before Devin suggested a non-work dinner, and several more such evenings passed before Rebecca was introduced to Liam in a casual group setting. "She's nice," Liam observed afterward as Devin tucked him into bed. "She didn't talk to me like I'm a baby." "Dr. Torres respects children," Devin agreed, smoothing his son's hair. "That's part of her job. Do you like her?" Liam asked with the directness only children manage. "I do," Devin admitted. "Would it bother you if she came around more often? Not to replace anyone, just as a friend to both of us." Liam considered this seriously. "I think that would be okay, as long as things don't change too fast." "Nothing changes without us discussing it first," Devin promised. "You and I are still a team." This careful approach characterized Devin's rebuilding efforts across all areas of his life. Where Bethany had been integrated rapidly and completely, Rebecca maintained her separate apartment and professional identity. Where financial entanglements with Bethany had been immediate and comprehensive, Devin established clear boundaries with transparent agreements. The lessons of betrayal had taught him the value of deliberate progress and conscious choices. Trust, once broken, could be rebuilt, but required stronger foundations and more careful architecture than before. By summer, these various threads, professional expansion, cautious new relationship, co-parenting with appropriate boundaries, had woven into a stable pattern that supported both Devin and Liam's well-being. The painful chapter with Bethany hadn't been forgotten, but had receded into proper perspective as one difficult period in otherwise fulfilling lives. What Devin couldn't anticipate was that this hard-won stability would face one final test, from a source he had considered fully resolved. Chapter 8. The Final Test. August brought record heat to the city, turning thoughts to cooler destinations. Devin had planned a 2-week vacation with Liam at a lakeside cabin in the mountains, their first extended trip since the divorce. Rebecca had been invited for the second week, a significant step in integrating her more fully into their lives. 3 days before their departure, Vivian Abbott requested an urgent meeting. "I wouldn't intrude if it weren't important," she said when Devin called to confirm. "It concerns Bethany, but more importantly, it may affect Liam." They met at a quiet cafe near Sentinel's offices, Vivian as elegantly composed as always despite the obvious strain in her eyes. "Bethany has disappeared," she said without preamble after the waiter had taken their orders and moved away. "She missed our weekly call, then 2 therapy appointments. Her apartment manager hasn't seen her in 10 days. Devin absorbed this information with measured concern. "Have you contacted local authorities?" "Of course. They conducted a welfare check, but found nothing alarming. Adult woman, no evidence of foul play, Not enough time elapsed for serious investigation. Vivian's fingers tensed around her water glass. But I received this yesterday. She passed her phone across the table. The screen showed a text message. Tell Devin I'm sorry I couldn't keep my promises. Some patterns can't be broken. Take care of Liam. When was this sent? Devin asked, studying the message. 3 days ago. I tried calling immediately, but got voicemail. Her phone has been off since. Vivian looked directly at him. I'm concerned she's going to do something desperate. Something that might hurt Liam. You think she's coming here? Devin's mind immediately shifted to security protocols. I don't know, but the mention of Liam worries me. Vivian hesitated. There's more. My attorney informed me that Bethany emptied her personal accounts last week. All of them. And she sold the jewelry she'd kept after the divorce. Pieces worth considerable money. She's running, Devin concluded. But from what? That's what I can't determine. Her therapist can't share details due to confidentiality, but confirmed missing appointments and expressed serious concern. Devin considered the implications. If Bethany was in crisis and had resources, she became an unpredictable factor. The mention of Liam suggested she might attempt contact or worse. I'll enhance security immediately and postpone our trip, he decided. Have you checked with her friends in Arizona? Former colleagues. Everyone I could think of? No one has heard from her. Vivian looked suddenly older, the weight of maternal worry evident despite their complicated relationship. I failed her in so many ways, Devin. If something happens to her now, let's not get ahead of ourselves, Devin said, softening his tone. People disappear for many reasons. Most return safely. After leaving Vivian, Devin contacted Parker and activated enhanced security protocols. Liam's summer day camp was briefed with updated photographs of Bethany and instructions to allow no contact. Surveillance was increased at their home, and Rebecca was advised to remain vigilant as well. The vacation was postponed indefinitely, with Liam told only that business matters required Devin's attention in the city. Though disappointed, he accepted the explanation with the resilience that had become his hallmark. For days passed without developments. Police in Arizona continued their cursory investigation, but found no evidence suggesting foul play or immediate danger. Vivian remained in the city, unwilling to return home while uncertainty persisted. On the 5th day, Devin received a call from Sentinel's Security Monitoring Center. Sir, we have movement at the Abbott Lake house. Security system detected entry using valid credentials. Mrs. Abbott is currently at the Four Seasons downtown. Devin replied, immediately alert. Who accessed the property? Female, matches height and build for Bethany Lowry from what we can see on exterior cameras. Arrived in rental car approximately 20 minutes ago. No one else visible. Maintain surveillance, but take no action, Devin instructed. I'm on my way. Alert local sheriff's department, but request standby only. No approach to the property yet. After confirming Liam was secure with Rebecca at her apartment under guard, Devin contacted Vivian. Bethany's at your lake house, he informed her. I'm heading there now. I'm coming with you, Vivian insisted. She's my daughter. It's not safe. We don't know her mental state or intentions, which is precisely why she needs her mother, Vivian countered with unexpected steel. I've stood aside too many times when Bethany needed intervention. Not again. Recognizing the futility of argument, Devin agreed to pick her up en route. They drove in tense silence. Devin receiving periodic updates from the surveillance team confirming Bethany remained alone inside the property with minimal movement detected. As they approached the secluded lake house, Devin reviewed what they knew. Bethany had liquidated all assets, disappeared without explanation, sent a cryptic message mentioning Liam, then surfaced at her family's vacation property. The pattern suggested either flight preparation or something more concerning. Let me approach first, Devin told Vivian as they parked a discreet distance from the house. Wait until I've assessed the situation. Vivian nodded reluctantly. Be careful with her. Whatever she's done, she's still my daughter. Devin approached the house cautiously, noting the rental car in the driveway showed no signs of hasty parking or distress. The lakefront property sat isolated among tall pines, its large windows overlooking peaceful water. No lights were visible inside despite the approaching dusk. At the front door, Devin hesitated, then knocked firmly. Bethany? It's Devin. Your mother is with me. We're concerned about you. Silence stretched for long seconds before the door opened slightly. Bethany stood in the dim interior, visibly thinner than when he'd last seen her, dressed in jeans and a simple t-shirt, a stark contrast to her former polished appearance. "You shouldn't have come," she said, her voice hoarse. "Either of you. Your message worried your mother," Devin replied evenly. "May I come in? Just to talk?" Bethany stepped back, allowing him entry but leaving the door open. The house's great room was shadowed, furniture draped with protective covers except for one chair where a small suitcase sat open. "Where's Liam?" she asked, scanning the driveway beyond the door. "With friends. Safe." Devin studied her carefully. She showed no signs of intoxication or obvious instability, but the tension in her posture suggested significant distress. "Bethany, what's going on?" "Your mother is worried sick. I needed to see the lake one more time," she said cryptically. "Before I leave." "Leave for where?" "Europe. South America. Somewhere I can start over completely." She moved to the wall of windows overlooking the water. "I thought I could rebuild here, become someone better. But everywhere I go, I'm still the woman who betrayed her family, who tried to blackmail her ex-husband, who got involved with criminals." "That doesn't mean you need to disappear," Devin said carefully. "Recovery takes time. It's not just that." Bethany turned to face him. 3 weeks ago, I saw Trent, my fitness instructor, at a restaurant in Phoenix with his new client. Same pattern, different target." Her laugh held no humor. "Watching him work his routine on another married woman, I suddenly saw myself clearly. How pathetic I'd been, how easily manipulated because of my own selfishness and entitlement. That realization is growth, not a reason to run," Devin pointed out. "The realization isn't why I'm leaving." Bethany hesitated. "After seeing Trent, I confronted him. Publicly. Warned the woman. Created a scene." She shook her head. 2 days later, someone broke into my apartment. Nothing was taken, but my photos were all turned face down. A warning. Understanding dawned. "You think Trent is threatening you. Or someone connected to him. He has associations with people worse than Monroe." Bethany wrapped her arms around herself. "I could handle it if it were just me at risk. But then I thought about what would happen if Liam got caught in the crossfire during a visitation request, or if I tried to reconnect someday." "So you're running to protect Liam?" Devin clarified, reassessing the situation. "To protect everyone involved. My mother. You. Liam." Bethany met his eyes directly. "I've done enough damage. I won't risk bringing more danger to people I've already hurt." The sincerity in her voice was unmistakable. Whatever her failings, Bethany was genuinely trying to protect those she had once harmed, even at significant personal cost. "Have you reported these threats to the police?" Devin asked. "With what evidence?" "Overturned photographs? My history makes me an unreliable witness at best." She shook her head. "It's better if I just disappear. Start somewhere new with a different name. And cut all ties with your mother? Your family? Everything familiar. It's the cleanest break." Bethany's voice wavered. "I've said my goodbyes in my own way." Devin considered his options. The Bethany before him was distinctly changed from the entitled, manipulative woman who had betrayed him, humbled by consequences and apparently motivated by protection rather than selfishness. Yet the situation she described presented genuine concerns that couldn't be dismissed. "Wait here," he finally said. "Your mother is outside. She deserves to hear this directly from you." When Vivian entered minutes later, the conversation shifted to a complex negotiation of maternal worry, protective instincts, and practical considerations. Devin stepped back, observing the interaction with professional detachment while formulating alternative approaches. "Running isn't the answer," Vivian insisted. "If there are threats, we address them directly. Your father built our family's resources to protect us, not to fund permanent exile." "Mother, you don't understand these people," Bethany argued. "They don't respond to money or influence. They respond to opportunity and revenge." "Then we remove both," Devin interjected, drawing their attention. "Sentinel specializes in threat assessment and neutralization. If Trent Montgomery or his associates pose genuine danger, we have resources to address it legally and permanently." Bethany looked skeptical. "Why would you help me after everything?" "Not for you," Devin clarified, his voice even. "For Liam, who deserves a chance someday to know his stepmother made better choices. For your mother, who doesn't deserve to lose her daughter to fear. And because it's what I do, eliminate security threats professionally and thoroughly." The discussion continued into the night, evolving from Bethany's escape plan to a comprehensive security assessment. Devin arranged for Sentinel's Phoenix affiliate to verify the apartment break-in and establish surveillance on Trent Montgomery. Vivian offered financial resources for security measures while making it clear she expected Bethany to continue therapy and recovery work. By morning, they had constructed an alternative approach. Bethany would relocate temporarily to a secure property owned by Sentinel's client network while Devin's team assessed and neutralized any legitimate threats. She would maintain regular contact with Vivian and continue therapeutic work remotely. When safe, she would resume building her new life, not in hiding, but with appropriate protections. "Why are you really doing this?" Bethany asked privately as they prepared to leave the lake house. "You could have let me disappear. It would have solved any potential problems permanently." "Because running solves nothing," Devin replied honestly. "It just changes the geography of fear. And because your willingness to sacrifice everything to protect Liam suggests you've genuinely changed. That deserves recognition." "I have changed," she said quietly. "Too late for us, but not too late for me to become someone better." "It's never too late for that," Devin agreed. As they departed the lake house, Devin recognized that this intervention represented the final chapter in their shared story. Not reconciliation or forgiveness exactly, but a more nuanced resolution, acknowledging growth while maintaining necessary boundaries. The woman who had once coldly stated, "I couldn't watch your stepkid," had evolved into someone willing to exile herself to protect that same child. The transformation didn't erase past harm, but demonstrated the possibility of genuine change, a lesson Devin hoped Liam would someday understand. Some betrayals couldn't be forgiven, but they could be survived. And sometimes, surviving well became its own form of victory. Chapter 9. Full Circle. Christmas decorations adorned the expanded Lowry home, twinkling lights reflecting in the windows as evening settled over the neighborhood. 2 years had passed since the tumultuous holiday that had marked the climax of Devin and Bethany's conflict. The intervening time had brought significant changes to everyone involved. Sentinel Solutions had completed its successful integration with Harrison Technical, expanding to national operations with Devin maintaining strategic leadership while delegating day-to-day operations to allow balanced family time. The merger had brought financial security that allowed him to purchase adjacent property, creating a larger home with space for new beginnings. Liam, now 10, had blossomed despite the family restructuring. Regular therapy had helped him process the complex emotions surrounding Bethany's departure and the subsequent changes. His natural resilience, combined with Devin's consistent support, had transformed potential trauma into growth. A child who understood that families came in many forms and that difficult changes could lead to positive outcomes. Rebecca Torres had become Dr. Rebecca Lowry 6 months earlier in a small ceremony, with Liam serving as best man. Their deliberate, measured approach to blending their lives had created a stable foundation distinctly different from Devin's previous marriage. Rebecca maintained her private practice while consulting for Sentinel, preserving professional identity alongside personal connection. As Devin arranged presents under the tree, the doorbell rang. Liam raced from the kitchen where he'd been helping Rebecca with Christmas cookies. "I'll get it," he called, checking the security monitor before opening the door. "Grandma Vivian. And you brought presents." Vivian Abbott entered with her characteristic elegance, though time had softened her formerly rigid demeanor. Behind her came an unexpected guest, Bethany, carrying a modest gift bag and looking both nervous and determined. Devin tensed momentarily before remembering the carefully negotiated arrangement. After Sentinel's investigation had confirmed and neutralized the threats from Trent Montgomery's associates, resulting in federal charges against 2 individuals for interstate stalking and extortion, Bethany had rebuilt her life cautiously in Colorado. Regular therapy, modest employment at an art gallery, and ongoing communication with Vivian had established a stable pattern far removed from her former entitled existence. The supervised holiday visit had been arranged months in advance, with clear parameters established by Liam's therapist and agreed to by all parties. This would be Bethany's first contact with Liam since the divorce, a carefully orchestrated reconnection designed to answer his questions and provide closure rather than re-establish a parental relationship. "Merry Christmas," Vivian greeted them warmly, embracing Liam before acknowledging Devin and Rebecca with genuine affection. The past 2 years had transformed her from reluctant ally to valued family connection, her relationship with Liam flourishing once freed from the complications of Devin and Bethany's conflict. Bethany remained in the doorway, uncertainty evident in her posture. "Hello, Liam," she said softly. "You've grown so much." Liam studied her with the direct curiosity of childhood. "You look different too," he observed. "Your hair is darker." "I stopped coloring it," Bethany explained, touching her now natural brown hair self-consciously. "This is what I really look like." The simple statement carried symbolic weight, a woman who had shed artificial presentations in favor of authenticity. Devin noted other changes as well. Simpler clothing, minimal jewelry, a quieter demeanor that suggested genuine introspection rather than performance. "Come in," Rebecca invited, seamlessly assuming the host role. "We were just about to have hot chocolate. There's plenty for everyone." The initial awkwardness gradually eased as they moved to the living room, where Vivian skillfully facilitated conversation with practiced social grace. Liam, initially reserved, gradually engaged with Bethany through Vivian's gentle prompting. "Are you still in Arizona?" he asked Bethany as they settled with their beverages. "Colorado now," she replied. "I work at an art museum in Denver, helping coordinate exhibitions." "Do you like it?" "I do. It's meaningful work, helping people connect with beautiful things, learn about different perspectives." Bethany's smile held none of her former artifice. "It's not glamorous, but it matters. Dad says work that matters is more important than work that pays a lot," Liam observed solemnly. "Your dad is right about that," Bethany agreed, glancing at Devin. "About many things, actually." As the evening progressed, Bethany maintained appropriate boundaries, making no claims on maternal connection while showing genuine interest in Liam's life and activities. When he opened her gift, a beginner's telescope with accompanying star guide, his excitement was genuine. "I remembered you were interested in astronomy," she explained. "The museum had an exhibition on space photography, and I thought of you." While Liam examined his gift, Bethany approached Devin and Rebecca in a quiet moment. "Thank you for allowing this," she said simply. "It means more than I can express." "Liam had questions only you could answer," Devin replied. "His therapist thought this would help him process everything that happened." "And has it? Helped him, I mean?" Rebecca answered gently. "Children are remarkably adaptable when they have stability and honesty. Tonight is part of that honesty, acknowledging the past while demonstrating healthy boundaries in the present." "I never deserved him," Bethany said quietly. "Either of you. But I'm grateful he seems happy now." "He is," Devin confirmed. "We all are." The evening concluded with appropriate farewells, promises of occasional letters, and clear understanding of future parameters. No false promises of frequent visits or renewed family connections, just honest acknowledgement of their respective places in each other's lives moving forward. After Vivian and Bethany departed, Liam helped clean up while processing the experience in his straightforward way. "Bethany seems nicer now," he observed while gathering wrapping paper. "Less fancy. People can change when they learn from their mistakes," Rebecca explained, folding a discarded bow. "Sometimes difficult experiences help us grow, like when I fell off my bike and was scared to ride again. But then I learned to be more careful, and now I'm really good at it?" Liam asked. "Similar to that, yes," Devin agreed, ruffling his son's hair. "Some lessons are harder than others, but they all help us become better versions of ourselves." Later, with Liam asleep and the house quiet, Devin and Rebecca sat before the Christmas tree, reflecting on the evening. "That went better than I expected," Rebecca admitted. "She's genuinely changed." "People can, when consequences are clear and growth is chosen," Devin replied. Bethany lost everything that mattered to her. In rebuilding, she seems to have found better priorities. "Are you glad you agreed to tonight?" Rebecca asked, studying his face in the colored lights. Devin considered the question carefully. "Yes, not for Bethany's sake, but for Liam's. And maybe a little for my own. There's value in seeing a difficult chapter truly concluded, rather than just slammed shut," Rebecca agreed. "Closure versus amputation." "Exactly." Devin's arm tightened around her shoulders. "It completes the circle. 2 years ago, I texted, 'You're on your own now,' while canceling every payment, believing that was the end. Tonight, I saw that it was actually just the beginning of something different." For all of you, Rebecca observed. Liam gained resilience. You found a healthier partnership. Even Bethany eventually found a better path, and proved that sometimes the harshest consequences lead to the most necessary growth. Devin gazed at the Christmas tree, remembering the chaos of that previous holiday. Not what any of us would have chosen, but where we needed to arrive nonetheless. In the quiet that followed, Devin reflected on the journey from betrayal to rebuilding. The woman who had once coldly stated, "I couldn't watch your stepkid," had been transformed by the consequences of that choice. The man who had texted, "You're on your own now," had found strength in vulnerability and connection rather than isolation. They had all been changed by the experience, not erasing the pain, but transforming it into wisdom that shaped better choices moving forward. Not perfect healing, but genuine growth. Not fairy tale endings, but authentic new beginnings. And in that transformation lay the true victory, not the satisfaction of revenge, but the triumph of resilience over betrayal. The ability to build something stronger from the broken pieces of what had been lost. As Christmas Eve became Christmas Day, Devin recognized that the greatest gift hadn't been defeating Bethany or protecting his assets, but discovering that even the deepest wounds could become foundations for something better, if faced with courage, integrity, and the willingness to grow beyond betrayal towards something truly worth building. The circle was complete. The future awaited.